Hey everybody, welcome. Oh, see, gang stalkers, bro. I just started up. I just started up my live stream. There you go. They heard me. They heard me expose the gang stalkers, and they shut their alarm off. For those who are wondering, yes. Hey, what's up, Cat Cans? This is my official smiling woman, smiling woman T-shirt that I mentioned on a recent episode of Dead Rabbit Radio, and here's the creepy little smile down there. And I don't tell anyone what it means. I just walk around with a shirt that says "smiling woman" with a little spooky smiley face. So that is the way we do it. No, Mewtwo, but thank you, thank you. I luckily I didn't. I wrote. Mewtwo asked if I had forgotten about live stream. I wrote this very professional note that says live stream, 6 p.m. Hey, Art Jimenez, thanks for joining us. Art always comes out. Art and Maria always come out for the live streams. And I've been wearing my Alien Invasion shirt on a bunch of my TikToks. Art and Maria gave me that Alien Invasion tie-dye, so that's been a lot of fun. Sephora, yes, hi. It has been a while. I really should do more of these. Part of it's time-wise, and part of it is wanting to keep them special. Like if I did one every month, it would just kind of get a little old, I think. We'll see how well this one goes. But really, what's that shadow back there? What is that? Is that? I don't know. Hey, Fabio. Hey, Snicks and Heaven MC. Hey, I don't think I've shown you guys this. I don't know what that weird shit. Oh, it's Baby Yoda. It's my Baby Yoda phone holder. Hey, Tracy from Australia. Glad to see you here. I made this a while back. I don't think I've shown this officially. I can't. It's so big I can't look over it. It's my. Can you see it? It's my Dead Rabbit Radio sign. We made this. Molly, my friend Molly, gave me the supplies for it, and kind of taught me how to do it. Just spray paint it. But yeah, this is from the not from the Oregon Ghost Conference, but from the UFO conference. And why is it not displayed in my house? Why is it just stuck in the corner? Because I don't have anywhere else to put it. Hey, Maria, glad you could join us. Dennis, thanks for joining us as well, and I'm glad that you're spreading the word about the podcast. Yeah, Cat Cans, these are them too. Yeah, I think the last one I did might have been like Halloween or Christmas. One of the two. I'm not entirely for sure, but yeah, maybe we'll do more. Now we have the Patreon monthly movie nights. That's been a lot of. Where's my little alien guy? There he is. That's been a lot of fun as well. Rhett, thanks for joining us. Awesome. I saw a movie last night, so with the Patreon movie nights, we've been watching. Hey, Nick James, thanks for coming in. We've been watching short films for the Patreon movie night. And I found a movie last night that might be one of the weirdest movies I've ever seen. I'll probably do a Dead Rabbit Recommends on it, not because it's a great film. It's not bad. But man, it was called Attack of the Adult Babies. And oddly enough, that's not what the movie's about. It's not about adult. First off, it was just on my computer as adult babies. I didn't have the attack of. So I had no idea. No idea what I was getting into when I started watching it. It's called Attack of the Adult Babies. And it has nothing to do with adult. Well, it does have, there are adult babies in it. But they don't attack anybody. It's super weird. I think they just chose that title because it was so bizarre. But the movie itself is absolutely insane. So Attack of the Adult Babies, and it's really well done. Like, I imagine they spent a couple $1 million making it. We'll probably watch it on a future Patreon movie night because it's just off the wall. It's absolutely bizarre. Hey, Hunter, glad you could join us. Glad you could join us for the live stream. My 5th anniversary live stream. Absolutely nuts to think that 5 years ago. I mean, think about like all this stuff behind me. These are all like little pieces over 5 years of the podcast. And like, this is my little backdrop. These are things that people sent me. And then I got this Bigfoot painting. It's just so cool to think of all the stuff that we've done together in 5 years. Hamza Zahid. Yes, yeah, we do conspiracy theories. We do them quite a lot on the show. I actually have an upcoming episode. Somebody sent me on Instagram. Thank you, Emilio. Thank you. Thanks for wishing me a happy 5-year anniversary. I don't know if I should say this yet. I don't know if I should say this yet. No, Camerahead, we just started. We really did just start it. We really just started. Rhett S. Let me answer this. Where are you at on U Bull movies? Too tame for you? No. U Bull is one of those guys that everyone goes through. I should say everyone. There's a cycle for people who watch U Bull films. First off, you start watching them when they were coming out, like Alone in the Dark and House of the Dead, and you're like, oh my God, these are absolutely terrible. Hey, Tito, glad you came out, and tell your mom hi. I'm glad she enjoys the podcast. U Bull, or Uwe Boll, however you pronounce it, he puts out like really bad movies, but if you watch enough of them, he becomes a genius. Like Tunnel Rats, which is based on a video game, apparently, was a really scary Vietnam movie. It wasn't about rats, but it was about fighting in the tunnels in Vietnam. Really, really claustrophobic film. That was a good one. Postal, I watched via YouTube clips. It was like broken into 10 parts back in the mid 2000s, late 2000s, something like that. And I loved it. Postal was hilarious. I was laughing so hard. I expected the worst film. But I think Uwe Boll's best movie is Rampage, not based on the video game at all. About a guy who goes on a shooting rampage in a small town. It's fantastic. It's such a good thriller. It's really violent and really intense, but I really enjoyed Rampage. I thought that was, unfortunately, he'd already built up so much ill will in the film community, beating up critics. Well, nobody cared about that, but that people don't give him a fair shake. But he's really into some really cool stuff. I really do like him, actually. Synapse user, so glad you could come out. If Synapse is asking the question, if you could do the podcast full time, would you? Absolutely. Like that's my dream. I would love to do it. And I think at this point, I think the fear of a lot of people, I was talking to someone about this the other day. Oh, my father was like, hey, he has this little synthesizer keyboard so I can like play sound effects. Hey, Daddy Bobbles, thanks for swinging by. Playing the synthesizer, and he goes, you could do sound effects. And I go, what, the podcast has been going on for 5 years. I don't want to change anything about it. I don't want to start bringing in professional sound effects. I don't want to hire an editor or anything like that. And I think the fear is that if I did do it full time, that the podcast might change, like might lose some of its soul. But after, again, like it's so ingrained, like after 5 years, I know what I like about the podcast. And I feel like I know what you guys like about the podcast. That if I could do it full time, I would. What I would like to add is more on the location places, like going to places and checking out some of these legends. And I would be doing, the only thing that would change in that was I would be recording more in hotel rooms and stuff like that. But that is what I'd love to do. I'd love to travel with this podcast, hit up conventions like Darren Marlar, who does Weird Darkness. That's what he does. He just travels around America hitting up conventions. He still puts out a daily paranormal podcast. So I would absolutely love to do that. And Daddy Bobbles, you finished binging all the episodes last month. That can happen. That's happened to me with several podcasts. And then it's that waiting game. Like you're like, wow, I found this huge backlog of this new podcast. And you listen to them all, especially if you're working like 8 hours a day. And then all of a sudden, now you just got to wait. Oh, another week. That was one of the things about putting out a daily podcast. I go, one, I hated waiting a week for new episodes. And two, I needed something that was constantly keeping me busy. If I knew that I had a week to do it, I wouldn't start working until the night before, which is what I do sometimes on a daily podcast. Sometimes I'll record an episode on Wednesday, edit it, and have it out that night. I've gotten better at not doing that. And another reason why I do the daily podcast is I think it allows me a little bit of leniency as far as leaving details out. If I put out an episode a week, you would want all the info on a particular case in that episode. But I'm able to cover a story, not like forget details, or not like willingly not do a lot of research, but I can look at a story and go, I don't have time to tell this whole thing. I'm going to leave this stuff out. And you go, well, it's a daily podcast. He can't tell the entire story. Mac and Cheese, thank you so much. Happy 5 years. Crazy. I've been listening since the episodes were in the 400s. It's crazy to even think that the episode got to episode 400. At this point, it's now just like looking back and going, yeah, it's at 1,100 episodes is what I just finished yesterday. And I don't like saying I just finished. We did that. We're doing all of this. And it's just fantastic. So I thank you guys so much for being part of this journey. Andrew Bentley, welcome, welcome. Let's see here. Synapse I live in the Dalles. Would you ever do a fan meetup? I was planning on going to your talk about fat ghosts, but I was sick. I would, but there's a couple different things. But I will say this: I just applied to do another conference in November up in Port Gamble, Washington, which is not the closest place. The Dalles is like right, it's 30 minutes away. It's like, dude, I don't want to drive all the way out to Port Gamble, but we'll be doing another thing up there. The thing, I've thought about, because every so often I go down to Sacramento, right? And I've had like people be like, hey, dude, I'm in Sacramento. I'm in Northern California. Will you do a fan meetup? And the problem is that, remember, I am paranoid. Hey, Helena, just saw you pop in there. I am paranoid to a certain level. And, I don't have a car. So let's say I do a fan meetup, and I'm sure you're a totally nice person. I'm not worried about you. But then some other weirdo shows up and is like, hey. And I was like, hey, how you doing? And he's like asking me all this crazy personal stuff. He's like a Fed or something like that. And I go, well, it's time for me to go. I push Synapse user in front of him and start running away. I don't have a car. I'm so easily followed. I'm just like walking down the street. Someone could easily just follow me all over town. That was the thing in Sacramento. I was like, I'd love to meet you guys. And I think you're fine, but if I do a fan meetup, I have to announce it publicly, and who knows who's going to show up, and I can't get away from them. I'm just like slowly walking away. I get on the bus, and the car's following me. At the end of the day, I'm still a paranoid person. I've still spent the last 30 years researching conspiracy theories. But yeah, that's where we're at on that. But I'd love to. I would have loved to. Maybe you're like, Jason, just say you wanted to travel around the country. My fear is that the show will get really big and I'll have to start taking Ubers and stuff like that. And I will lose my mind because I hate getting in strange people's cars. I don't even want to ride in a taxi, but I can't drive everywhere. And so every time I got in a Uber, I'd be like, oh my God, I'm about to get kidnapped. That happened. That was a horrible story I'm going to cover on my TikTok. I'll answer that question about that doll real quick. A woman got an Uber and they were driving near the Texas-Mexico border. And she thought she was going to get kidnapped, and she shot the driver. And he wasn't a kidnapper; he was just a dude. So now she's in jail. They'll have the trial. That is Veronica the Haunted Doll, Mac and Cheese. We actually did an episode on her a long time ago. I bought her off of eBay when I was researching some haunted dolls. This is the first time I've ever had her up in a live stream. I think I'm just going to start including her in the TikToks too. I do feel that I need to buy her a dress. I do feel that I need to buy her clothes. She's wearing clothes. That is not a naked doll, but I feel like I need to buy extra clothes. So let's see here. YouTube, you haven't watched the first 150 episodes. Yeah, a lot of the early episodes aren't on YouTube because I was on a different podcasting service and it wasn't as easy to just hit a button and have them automatically uploaded. So that's when you start to get the clips. Gabriel M., I'm so glad that you're part of the show, listening to the show. And Sephora Ari, thanks for getting the word out. That's exactly the thing, is getting the word out, getting people to listen to the show. Alexander Chalari, big fan of the show. Don't you agree that it would be awesome to see some of your stories on the podcast to be animated? It would. There actually is in the YouTube channel a proof of concept, a dude animated like, I don't know, 5 minutes of a episode. It was the Thomas Dick episode. And it's awesome. It's so cool to have the animation thing. it would just take a ton of time or a ton of money, and probably both, because it is a daily show. Like if we were able to go through and pick out like the best segments and turn them into animated, oh, I think that'd be fantastic. I think that'd be fantastic. I don't even know like what would be involved in that, but that'd be something like, yeah, if we did the show full time, I would have to just hire somebody and be like, here, do this. I'm gonna order them, like, do it, do it. No, I mean, like, I'd have to hire someone to pay them, but oh, that would be fantastic. I would love that. A Google user, would I ever bring guests on to tell their own sides of the story? That's an interesting thing that pops up every once in a while. That question, and again, here's the thing: I would do a separate episode that was that. If I started interviewing people, it would be a weekend episode. So you'd have, because I don't like changing with the formula. Imagine if all of a sudden you got 5 episodes of Dead Rabbit Radio a week, and now you get 4 and an interview on Friday. See, as a listener, I don't like change like that. So I think it would be cool. A big part of it is I don't have the technology for it. My internet is spotty at best. I'm using my phone. I really use my internet through my phone, and doing live streaming, things like that, is just tricky for me. Well, the live streaming seems to be working good so far, but interviews and things like that, and having people in a spot would be awesome. Like if I could have someone over, because my thing is I hate it when you're listening to an interview and a podcast and the audio quality changes between the speakers. So it's not that I'm against it, it's that I just don't have the technology for it, and it would have to be something separate from the initial 5 days of the podcast. I think we would break it up like that. But yeah, I think that would be awesome. That would be totally awesome. Rhett said, I started listening a month before Art Bell died. Yeah, that episode, I think, Ghost to Ghost is the name of that episode. That one, I think, popped up in a repeat or recently, or I did a classics on it. That was sad. Like I saw George Norrie and met him the other day. I talked about that on a recent episode and shook his hand. Art Bell was definitely like the granddaddy of it all. When I started listening to Coast to Coast, it was more of the George Norrie era. I was a kid with Art Bell, and then he left because of that horrible thing that happened to his kid. And I remember the conspiracy theory community was like, oh my God, did the government finally silence Art Bell? And it was more horrific than you could imagine. There was some child molester attacked Art Bell's kid. So he took time off. And then he had I think he had a show, something in the desert. I think he was doing that for a while, because it's hard to leave. It's hard to walk away from paranormal research, I think, or really anything you're passionate about. But yeah, that was a long time. Art Bell passed away quite a while ago. I think it was like the first 100 episodes I did that episode. Yeah, Tito. If you have, people who have personal stories like that, Tito says that they have a Skinwalker story. You can always feel free to email me. Always feel free to send them over to me, deadrabbitradio@gmail.com. The reason why I say all that stuff at the end of each episode, give out my email address, talk to you about my social. I don't use Twitter that much. I use TikTok more than Twitter. I don't even give a shout out to Twitter anymore, actually. I stopped doing that a long time ago. I never used it. The only time I use Twitter is when I auto upload my TikToks and stuff like that. But feel free to email me that stuff. Put it in the YouTube comments if you feel comfortable with that. Email it. If you don't, you want it to be a little more private, because really that's what I do. I'm just constantly scouring the internet for stories, and most of them are first person. Most of them are a single witness. And there's no reason to say that a story that I find out of a book or a story I find on a website is any more legit than the story you experience. So truly, just email me that stuff. And that would be great. Have you ever been, Mac and Cheese asks, have you ever been recognized in public? Yeah, now that I'm doing the TikToks and they go to my YouTube shorts, and YouTube just has been promoting them. I didn't do any shorts last season, and I really regret that. It really kind of stymied my YouTube growth. But I went to some dude hit me up on the YouTube comments and was like, hey, do you live in Hood River? I think I've seen you walking around. And I was like, what? And I was like, yeah, sure. Because I talk about it on the podcast, right? I've talked about where I live on the podcast. Maybe a week later, I went into a local pizzeria, and the dude behind the counter was like, it's you. I was like, what? Hey, what's going on? He says, you're the guy on the YouTube. You're the guy who does those true crime things. He totally recognized me. He said, and we talked to him. He goes, yeah, I saw you walking around and I was surprised. I think what YouTube does is they will I didn't know they did this because they will geographic because it's not so big that the chances of him randomly hit it. And I've had friends of mine say, "Hey, you're popping up on my YouTube." So apparently, it does do a geographical distribution. A Synapse user, I remember the podcast where you thought someone got in your house. Yeah, ever so I'm talking about being paranoid. Ever so often, I think there's someone in my house or a ghost dog in my house. Um, you just here's the thing: like you can only do so much to protect it. You can only do so much to protect yourself, right? So I mean, if the feds are going to get in your house, they're going to get in your house. There's not much you can do about that. There's really not much you can do about it. But what are you going to do except walk around your house with a knife, poking shower curtains, making sure there's no one on the other side? Synapse, the Synapse, and I know I'm a bit behind on the comments. Synapse users, this brings up an interesting point. If and you obviously have to consider it when you're creating stuff like this. They said if the show got really big, you would probably need to push psyops. And here's the thing, like you do have to wonder about that. Like I don't know how true that is. It may be, right? It may 100% be. I'm not denying that it isn't true, or it may not be, or it may be somewhere in between. When you look at people like Alex Jones, you you wonder how, like I think he got too ahead of his skis on a lot of stuff. And he was just chasing the numbers. I think when he was talking about certain subjects and he saw the downloads explode, it was a money decision. He goes, I'm just going to keep talking about this and I'm going to get all these new listeners. And it ended up getting him sued for billions of dollars. I don't, if he was pushing psyops, you think he would have had more coverage? You think that the government would have had his back a little bit more, not had certain charges go through or whatnot? But who knows? Like that is a super interesting question. Like if I was sitting here and let's say the show blows up, I got 1 million downloads a day. Am I saying the CIA wouldn't come to my door? I mean, if you're getting 1 million downloads a day, but I mean, like then you look at people like Joe Rogan. Like I don't know. It's such an interesting question. It's hypothetical. We can assume that it does happen, and I'm sure there is some level of influence pushed on it. But yeah, it's a super interesting. I've thought about that. Like honestly, I've thought about it. Like, what do you do when the government comes to you and says, "Hey, we really like your show. Well, we don't. We think it's kind of dumb. You should get a synthesizer to do your sound effects, but we want you to start this narrative. We want you to start backing this narrative. And if you don't, we'll just have the algorithm bury you." Like, what do you do at that point? Do you walk away? I think you wouldn't have to make a decision right then and there, because the thing is, they may come to you with a narrative that you agree with, right? They may come to you and say, "Hey, you're pushing this certain theory about extraterrestrials. That's exactly what we want people to think. So keep doing that, and we're actually going to leak you documents. This is going to be totally stay." I see. Sometimes I think the psyops are done and you don't even know about it, right? Like Project Serpo, I think was someone was trying to leak information about something else, and they got all these documents pushed out there with all of these errors in them, and people were correcting the errors, and then they're like, no, you can't change anything about it. You have to read it verbatim. I think that is more likely that I may start getting emails from insiders about a certain thing, and then I'm unwillingly or unknowingly pushing the psyop. I think that's more likely than the feds knocking on my door. But what happens if you agree with the psyop and you go, "Oh, no, I believe in this and this is for national security." That's what you say. I'm going to go along with it. Once you go along with it, the next time they come to you with a psyop, it may be something you don't believe in, but you've already hitched your wagon to that. So no, it's super interesting question. Super interesting question. Yeah, Void Mirror is afraid that doll is going to start moving. You know what? It's funny is that I've never gotten that. I've never gotten a negative vibe from Veronica. I've never gotten a negative vibe from this little doll. But you know, it's so funny. I actually placed it up there to make it so it wouldn't fall down. You know what I mean? I just am like, it's boop, so that way he wouldn't fall over. I'm looking at this here. Jeremy, I'm glad you're enjoying the show. Really, really, really digging it. Um, and then Bane Bear, thanks for popping out. No context. Also, long time supporter of the show. Really, really appreciate you guys swinging on by. Sorry, looking through these comments here. Daddy Bobbles brings up another interesting good point. There's a lot of really good points in here. I'm just trying to catch up to the comments. I get caught up here. Daddy Bobbles said, I still have the folder for it. I remember one of your old episodes, you entertained the idea of making a separate podcast for much darker stories you didn't want to cover. Yeah, Dead After, well, should I say the title? Someone's going to get the title. It's a dope title for a podcast, but it fits more with this Dead After Dark. And here's the thing, like, these stories are just awful. They're just true crime stories that, like, when I read it, I'm like, so bad, so bad. And I'm not sugarcoating it. Like, I don't even want to go into the details of some of them. Every so often, one of the stories will leak into the podcast, like the story about the kid. He was like a teenager or something. Well, I don't want to reiterate. I don't want to reiterate it. I was making a hands of grabbing something. It was horrific crime. It was a random crime against a little kid. And that one I ended up covering on the podcast just because I couldn't stop talking about it, thinking about it. And I was like, I just got to get this off my plate. I'm going to share this with all of my friends so I no longer have it haunting me. Dead After Dark, I think, is a great idea. Again, that would be a side podcast. And that was, so the thing is I've thought about, I don't want to put Dead Rabbit Radio behind a paywall. That was one of the things that when I set out starting the podcast, I didn't want to make it so if you want to listen to the past 1,000 episodes, you got to pay $10 a month or whatever it is. There are podcasts that do that. I mean, I'm not knocking their hustle or anything. That's not something I want to do. With Dead After Dark, I thought this could be something that at first, like, Dead Rabbit Radio is still coming out 5 days a week. And then once a week or once every 2 weeks, there'd be an episode of Dead After Dark. And it would start off for Patreon supporters. And then after 2 weeks, that episode would be available so to the general public. So it would be a way to kind of have a separate podcast. But here, and because I really love to reward everybody. I love everyone to have, especially with paranormal research. I think it's super important. I don't like it when it's paywalled because it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's like a library, right? Everyone should have access to this stuff. But at the same time, I also want to give my Patreons, because they give me so much. I was trying to figure out a way to give them early access to a separate podcast. The problem with Dead After Dark is I don't want to swim in those waters all the time. I have a folder. I have all these articles bookmarked. It's, in a sense, ready to go, but I don't want to be like, oh man, I got to come up with something. I'm like crying. I was like, I got to come up with something horrific for I got an episode coming out in 2 weeks. I don't want to swim in those waters too much. Right. I read the article and I put it in the folder, and maybe someday, and here's the other thing. It wouldn't be as lighthearted. It wouldn't be as lighthearted or as funny as Dead Rabbit Radio. Like the Catherine episode I did recently, that was a little depressing, about the local woman in town who's crazy. They called her Crazy Catherine, and she accidentally killed herself. But that episode was balanced out by that story about my dad beating up that man, that adult who made me do push-ups. You couldn't really do that on an episode where you're focusing on super dark crime. So I do think it's super interesting, but we'll see what comes out of it. Like I really just, that's the big issue about kind of floating in there. Matt Jarbo asked, are your YouTube shorts actually helping build the podcast? Yeah, especially on YouTube. YouTube's such a visual medium, and it's totally changed that. And you do get, so when I first started doing the TikTok, so this is interesting to go back to that Dead After Dark thing. I love true crime. I absolutely love true crime. Most of the reading I do every day is true crime articles. But what I learned is that day-to-day true crime does not fit well into Dead Rabbit Radio. It just doesn't. I mean, if you listen to the original pitch, it was paranormal conspiracy and true crime. True crime's the thing we cover the least. It usually has to be super insane, not necessarily violent, but just like a really weird crime, unsolved mystery with no answer, things like that. But I love true crime. So I started doing the TikToks. I was like, well, this will give me, I'm not working hard enough on the podcast. I need something else to do every single day. One, it'll give me video experience. Two, it will give me, I love talking about true crime, but it didn't fit into the podcast. It just is so, it sticks out like a sore thumb when it's there, unless it's like a really crazy story, like that guy who made the deal with the devil to win the lottery. So he went and murdered two women at a park. Like that's, there's actually more stuff I need to cover about that story. That was an episode we did about 300 episodes ago. More stuff has come out after that trial. A YouTuber got his account canceled because he was the guy who was talking about how to make this deal. Like it actually ended up kind of sprawling out from there, but that's fine. That kind of fits in with it. But just day-to-day true crime doesn't. Carjackings, injustice, criminals being let go and then murdering again and again and then being finally captured for the second time. I like talking about that stuff on the TikTok and on the YouTube channels. And yeah, it does help the podcast grow. Now that I put a little thing in it saying, hey, check out my podcast, it's actually helping that. No Context asked, will you spend another week talking about fat witches? The thing I saw, I think it was you who commented on YouTube the other day where I said in an episode last week, I talked, because when I pick my rerun episodes or the Retro Rabbit, those are episodes that I have memory, like fond memories of the subject matter, but I haven't listened to them lately. So sometimes I'll make a reference to something. You're like, wait, what? You said yesterday I talked about this. You're like, no, yesterday was a brand new episode. But I'll look at these episodes and I'll look at those titles and I'll go like, oh, I know, or at least I think this is a good episode. Let's put this out there. The fat witches thing, definitely fun. It was a weird story. I don't know if I could do it again unless it pops back up, right? I can't force the stories. But I should run the original Fat Witches episode as a Retro Rabbit. I think that would be pretty fun. Cat Can says it would be cool if I could take calls or do some sort of interactive thing on the weekends. It would be. You know what's super weird is it's, as far as I can tell, because I have looked into it, very expensive. You have to sign up for like this internet service, like this internet radio service. It's like $100 a month or something like that. Might even be more. Might be less, honestly, but it's not as easy as you think it would be. I think there was probably like a train going by. I think there was a time when the internet was more freewheeling and that stuff was cheaper, because I'm pretty sure there were internet shows like that, but it's a technology thing and a cost thing with that. Absolutely, but that would be fun. That absolutely would be fun. Cat Cans, this is interesting. Jason, I've always wondered what was your connection to the last podcast on the left. I think it was Henry Zabrowski that sang your praises and actually turned me on to your show. I don't know if that's true. You're the second person to say something like that before, but I've never heard the audio. I mean, that would be awesome, right? But I've never heard I don't know if there's any proof. I mean, Cat Cans, unless you're from the Mandela verse, the Henry Zabrowski verse, I don't know. I as far as I know, I don't have any connection to him. But you look at the big people in this sphere, and it's last podcast on the left, Mysterious Universe, Mysterious Radio, Sofa King Podcast, Weird Darkness. These are the guys who have been doing it for so long. And I saw something the other day. I don't remember where I saw it, but it was comparison is the theft of joy, where you acknowledge that these people have made it in their thing, but I can't go, why do they have that and I don't? To me, it would be the equivalent of somebody who just started making movies 5 years ago and being like, well, how come Michael Bay gets all of these big contracts? Well, because he was shooting car commercials for the longest time. Same thing with Zack Snyder doing music videos and stuff like that. Like, you put your work in and you earn that. And some people work really hard, and they never make it. Some people put in 2 days of work and lightning strikes and they're the biggest thing in the world. So it's not always across the board. But I mean, you got to have your hats off to those guys. Same thing with Art Bell and George Norrie. Like again, you you know you put in the work, things can happen. If you put in no work, it's very unlikely things are going to happen. And some people put in, sometimes lightning strikes, like I said. But I don't know. Like, to answer that question, I would be super interested to hear that clip. Now one's probably going to come up that's deep fake, but I listened to those guys back in the day. I listened to a lot of Sofa King podcasts back in the day, and that's how I spent my workday. Like, that's why I love hearing from you guys being like, "Oh yeah, man, it helps me get through the day. I'm a forklift operator. I have your podcast on full blast and running people over, so I'm not paying attention to the safety sirens." I used to go to work, and I had worked in this little office all by myself, and I would walk in, hook up my phone to the little device, and I would listen to podcasts for 8 hours a day, and I loved it. Loved it. I don't have a lot of time to listen to podcasts now, but oh no, it's so awesome to just have like those people. Like, people call it parasocial, but I don't think that is. Like, if that's the case, everything's parasocial. Every television show you watch, every author you like, you'd be like, oh, I'd love to sit down and ask this author about this book. It's just the way we are. We're hardwired to be social. So I think like you listen to that and it's just part of your day. I think it's totally awesome. And all those podcasts was a part of my day, listening to those guys. Fabio, thanks first off for swinging by, longtime supporter. You encourage us to try ghost hunting. This is funny. You encouraged us to try ghost hunting and gave us good advice, but never told the instrument techniques that you used or found more safe, apart from recording and not listening back, which is what I've done. We got 8 hours of audio. I'm not listening to 8 hours of audio. I'll turn the camera on and leave it in a bedroom for 8 hours and then go downstairs and play the PS2. But then when it comes time to review the footage, I'm like, whatever. I'm sure there's a bunch of ghosts. That's super interesting question. You kind of got me on the spot there. I encourage you to go ghost hunting. Didn't tell you how to do it. Hey, go out and shoot a deer with what? I don't know. Throw a rock. If that doesn't work, I don't know. Bazooka. See, I was always one of those guys who was more about the experience of it. So you go out there and you go to look for ghosts, and it wasn't so much about bringing back evidence. It was about bringing back experiences, because really at the end of the day, it's so hard you can have the best camera in the world and any sort of paranormal phenomenon is just going to mess it up. And then when you go, well, I showed up with this huge Canon DSLR. Is that still a camera type? Camera. And if I didn't get any photos because the ghost drained the battery, people are going to be like, okay. So we went out there to have the experiences. And if nobody believes us, nobody believes us. If I brought back a photo of a ghost, but it was like a wisp moving through the forest, people would be like, well, that's dust, or that's, some big giant plant getting blown over during a hurricane. They're not going to believe it anyways. So I would say just go out there. My number one rule is stay sober while you're ghost hunting, and have something to defend yourself. I might have said that in the episode. I don't know. Have a cell phone just in case things go sideways. But other than that, just to go out there and hang out with people, meet local people in the area. You're always going to find people who are into the paranormal, and just to experience it. But other than that, if you absolutely want, I think your cell phone alone works as a great ghost recording device, not like the apps, but you have a microphone, you have a camera, you have a video camera, it's all in your pocket. Some people bring in spirit boxes, some people bring in those little things that detect the temperature gauge. Those are all fine. You can definitely use those. But again, even then you go, hey man, I was out in the woods and I brought this radio that keeps scanning and it said you will die. People still aren't going to believe you. People who believe in ghosts are going to believe you. People who won't, you're not going to be able to prove it anyways. So I would just say, have fun. Have fun as demons are chasing you through the graveyard. A Google user said, I forgot to message you about a year ago with a 4chan thread about a cult farm, and the guy found a dead cow outside his window. That email I don't remember that. I have had issues with getting emails, which, again, the paranoid side of me goes, well, it's because the government doesn't want me to know about this cow. But I have had issues with it. So, no, I'd love to see that again if you still have it. I know I've become really good at archiving stuff. 4chan, the export specifically, can move fairly fast, and then the Reddits, all of these different Reddits out there, they are constantly culling material. They're constantly going through and saying, nope, not good enough, not good enough. So I've had to start archiving stuff because, again, I look at paranormal research as research, and you want to archive it. You want to have it so somebody, I'm trying to death proof the show too. So if I die tomorrow, there's still this stuff out there. I've gotten at least, I think, the first 400 or 500 episodes up on Internet Archive. So if something happened to me, there's that. And I'm trying to get all the show notes and everything archived. If, because here's the thing, like, if something happened to me tomorrow, TikTok, once my internet service, once my podcast provider, stops getting paid, all the episodes are gone. It's not like YouTube where a user can die, and I'm not going to die. It just actually here's my electrocardiogram. I'm perfectly healthy. My cardiologist said I had a beautiful heart, but now I'm just making sure my social security number wasn't on that. Yeah, what were we talking about? The card. Oh, my heart's giving out. Oh, death proofing the show. Yeah, sorry, the blood flow to my brain was dying. The having that archive up, having the information up, keeping it there so people can look into it, because that's the thing. A lot of these websites now, stuff on Discord can't be archived. There could be really good paranormal research going on in Discord. We'll never know. It'll just disappear, which sucks. Mac and Cheese said, how would you go about sending something to Fan Art Friday? DeadRabbitRadio@gmail.com is probably the easiest way. People hit me up though on Instagram, Facebook. I also promote the Facebook on there. And I think the email is probably easiest one. But you're like, Jason, didn't you just say you have trouble getting emails sometimes? This is what I say. Whatever social media is the easiest way for you to get a hold of me, use that, because I'm pretty much everywhere. I even have a Rumble account. I don't really check it that much, and I have a Telegram. I don't really check that stuff much. But, like Instagram, if put in the YouTube comments, have a link to an Imager site or anything like that. Whatever's easier for you guys. And then, it's not something that you have to be a Patreon to send the Fan Art Friday. Any way you can get it to me would be fantastic, because I love that stuff. Absolutely love that stuff. Tito says the house is haunted, but it seems to be intermittent and never consistent. I'll have no activity for months, and I start to hear crowds in other rooms, knocks, seeing faces peeking. That's super spooky. That's an interesting thing. Why is it not just the peeking faces, not just the crowds talking, but why is it inconsistent? And I think probably if you look at a lot of even the ghost stories we cover, sometimes they take place over a course of a couple of days. That was that Jen story we had. It's just a couple of days. But I will come across a lot of stories, and they're like, this has gone on for like years. And there'll be 4 experiences that they're talking about, but it'll be spread across years. I think most paranormal activity isn't consistent. It could be a quick burst, or it could be over time. But I'd be interested to know if it, like, what would be going on. Are there different people living in the house at different times? Is it maybe you say inconsistent, but you find that it always happens during the summer, or it always happens, during certain emotional states or different time periods and things like that? So who knows? It could be 100 different things that's causing that. But I think most paranormal activity is inconsistent. That's why it's always super interesting when we find a story where they're like, every Wednesday night in Idaho Falls, you'll watch this ghost kill himself. That's the rare one. Those are rare when it's on like clockwork. If you go like every 4 years, if you go to this sea beach cliff thingy, you'll see a woman standing there waiting for her husband to come back from a sea voyage. Those are the more rare ones. It usually is inconsistent. Short Circuit says, been listening to this podcast since episode 258, and I just fell in love with it. Happy 5th anniversary, Jason. It's crazy. Thanks for hanging out. And enjoying the show. Yeah, I don't want to keep bringing it up, but it's just so awesome. It's so awesome, right? Like at a certain point, like the numbers, you go, okay, we're at 1,100 episodes, which is weird, because I'm typing it in episode 1,100 yesterday, and I sent it off, and then when I step back and I think about it, I go, that's a lot. That's actually a lot That's close to 500 hours of content around there. And it's awesome. And I couldn't have done any of it without you guys. So really, really appreciate all of it. Tito says last time saw an old lady peeking at me last October in my garage. So I mean, again, I would wonder, which is again, let's not ignore how terrifying that is. I would be curious to see if you could match it up. Does it happen every couple months? Does it happen on particular seasons? How it works out and things like this. So super interesting. Catcan says, sadly, as we are seeing in the news nowadays, paranoia is just common sense. You know, that can be. I think there's definitely like I would always say when it affects your choices on a monumental scale, that's when it's a problem. When I go, listen, I don't want to take an Uber because I might get stabbed to death by some crazy psychopath. I don't think that's technically paranoia. I think that's just being careful. But if I said I don't ever want to leave my house because I'm afraid that a psychopath's going to stab me in the back of the neck with a screwdriver, now we have a mental health concern. I think that's kind of the thing. But yeah, no, a little bit of paranoia can help, right? It can keep you out of bad situations, especially when your spider senses are tingling, when you're getting into that particular Uber car. This episode is sponsored by Uber. I don't even know who sponsors the podcast. Like those advertisements, they all come from my podcast. One day I was listening to an episode and the Maytag washing machine company had a song set to the lyrics of Stacy's mom. Maytag's month, it's got it going on. It's all. I was like, what? What is this? So for all I know, Uber advertises all over the podcast. It was a catchy song though. I remembered the lyrics and the tune. But yeah, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, Uber. The fact that I don't want to get an Uber car. Yeah, no, I don't think that's paranoia. That I think that's just. I don't think people should be getting in strangers' cars. Tito Nitrogen says, "I'm willing to discuss things from X, given the massive taboo 4chan." The thing with, and they have it split in two. So you have 4chan and 4channel, but the way I look at it is you have different boards with different attitudes. It's the same thing with I think Reddit has a far worse. I don't want to get into it. I've actually talked about how much I despise Reddit on podcasts, and I've taken it out. Reddit has just absolutely stuff that's way worse than anything you'll find on 4chan. And not only that, it's up for months, and there's whole communities around it. The worst possible thing you can find on 4chan, which it really, let's be honest, is probably, the government's watching everything that's posted on there. The worst possible thing that's posted on 4chan will disappear in a matter of hours, if not minutes, if people are reporting it. That same material can be in a private subreddit on Reddit for months on end. And people are continuing to watch it and view it. It's absolutely horrible. So why does one have a worse reputation than the other? Well, one's private, but you still can have, 1,000 weirdos in this group. And then, the X board has always been one of the more calm places on that website. I don't really go a lot of other places on there. I go to fitness board and the X board and sometimes the comics board, especially like if a comic book movie just came out, I'll go and read about it there. But it does have a bad reputation. I think it's been changed since they broke it into the safe for work and then unsafe for work sections. And again, like it's just super weird how people pick and choose what is awful, because Reddit's the worst. Reddit's the absolute worst as far as that goes. Let's see here. Yeah, Synapse user, do you still go on X? I don't go on X as much as I used to. I used to go on it when I was just reading about paranormal stuff. For me, I think you have to go. It runs in these pretty big cycles where you'll have like I said, it moves relatively fast, but you'll have like a list of topics, and they'll talk about like the submarine that recently exploded. There's going to be conspiracy theories about that on the X board for the next 2 weeks, and there's going to be the succubus threads and all that stuff. So you kind of just can pop into X from time to time and get an idea of what is going on. I usually do like the threads that only have like 10 replies. Those are the ones to me that are the more interesting ones. Maybe it's because I'm a contrarian, but You know, I pop in and out. It's interesting because as far as the export goes, as far as like material to cover on the podcast, there's not a ton of stuff on there nowadays. I think there was a golden age. You know, people always say this about websites where you had a lot of more conspiracy content, a lot of more paranormal content going on there. Now you pop in, I'd say once or twice a week, I think you'll get a pretty good vibe for what people are talking about at that time. And that can kind of set the table. And this is the interesting thing. I was actually telling someone else about this. I go, you guys may not like this, but I go, the back rooms. I go, the back rooms was something that was super familiar on the export for like a year and a half, 2 years. And we all read it. We all looked at it. We thought it was cool the first 10 times we saw it. And then they post and post and post. And we saw the zeitgeist grow around the back rooms. We saw it get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then someone shot a short movie about the back rooms. And now they got a Hollywood deal to shoot a big budget film. And I think everyone who was watching the back rooms and watching the zeitgeist grow, and it was appealing to people, all of us have the opportunity to do that as well. If you are a creator, if you have access to those type of tools, all of us could have made that movie or written a book and been the first to tap into that source. Because we saw it, right? We saw it started off as just a singular image, and then it kind of grew from there. And people started talking about liminal space and the back rooms. And that's what's interesting about the export. It does set the table. It does create the zeitgeist as far as what people are going to be talking about in the paranormal world. Look at the conspiracy theory iceberg. I mean, that's a perfect example. And I'm glad that we covered so much conspiracy theory iceberg stuff when we did in the beginning, 2018, 2019, 2020. We covered it. Now, when I look at a conspiracy theory iceberg, they've never gotten better than the ones in 2018. My question always is who made them? Because those topics were so obscure, a lot of them, stuff that we really had to dig for. Who knew all of those topics and put them in the conspiracy theory iceberg? That's really when I stopped covering the conspiracy theory iceberg. What we were talking about psyops earlier, right? Who created that? Whoever created that had to know all of those topics. These are things we didn't even know existed. Eggless travel, which took a lot of research to find out that is based on something. Mormon Bigfoot, World War II never existed. All of these things that we've talked about on this podcast that came off the conspiracy theory iceberg took me a long time to uncover. And a lot of them I was getting help from you guys as well. Who created that? That was really my episode is it time to melt the conspiracy theory iceberg? And in that, my thing was, there have been times where I've covered really crazy conspiracy theories and people go, well, is it on the conspiracy theory iceberg? And I was like, no, it's not. And they're like, oh, well, then it's not important. Oh, well, no, that's not. We shouldn't have gatekeeping in the paranormal community or the conspiracy theory community. Export sets the table. Export dictates what's going on. The nobody came out of, I know this is all deep conspiracy stuff, and I hope I'm not boring you guys, but the nobody, the story of that came out of Godlike Productions a long time ago. We covered that on the podcast, but it wasn't until it hit the export that it became more popular. The idea of NPCs, all of this stuff, the export sets the table. You can say whatever you want about 4chan as a whole, but the export itself, I feel, is just a different culture than that, and it sets the table. And it's good to check in on from time to time. But I've been on it off and on for years. It does set. You can get a kind of idea of what is going on in the paranormal conspiracy world. But when you go to it every single day, you're just like, it can be the same threads over and over again. And sometimes people will shoot me stuff over and they'll be like, hey, did you hear about this insider on export? Did you hear about this? Did you hear about that? And I appreciate that stuff, definitely. Let's see here. Synapse users asked, Jason, do you still drink coffee? Diet Mountain Dew. That's funny. Cat Cans pretty much said what I just said. X is a very important part of the paranormal conspiracy community. Yeah, and I think that there's always good and bad people in each community. We're gonna get it, unfortunately. Um, yeah, Daddy Bobbles, the spearhook episode was insanely dark. Yeah, this I think the spear gun. That was one. If it's the same one, that was one that I almost didn't cover. I think the episode before, like I actually, because I'm that was back when I was recording episodes each day before they came out, and if you messed up, you had an episode due. And I remember I recorded the spear gun, and I was like, I can't release this. This is too terrifying and just too dark. This guy killed his kids with his no, it was his wife and his daughter with a spear gun. Super graphic. And I said I'm not going to release it, but I had to because I didn't have time to record something else. And that episode, Jason, that's a horrible reason. But yeah, that's something that would be in Dead After Dark. Matt Jarbo. That name is so familiar. That name is super familiar. I don't know if we've talked before in the YouTube comments, but they said I run a podcast called Hollywood After Dark. I think that's yeah. I think Dead After Dark. I mean, here's the thing. When I trademarked the name Dead Rabbit Radio, I have the federal trademark. One of the things was they're like, you can't trademark the word radio. I hope you know that. I was like, no, that's fine. That's fine. You probably could, like, if you had Hollywood Dead After Dark and it's been around, and I came out with Dead After Dark, you could probably honestly make the argument that that is polluting your brand, especially if it was true crime. You could go, well, people are going to get it confused. Dead After Dark, Hollywood After Dark. But yeah, no, and I'll check that out. Let me write that down. I actually have my notepad here. I have you guys have my Minecraft notepad. But see little dudes? See them? Yeah, geez, I'm not impressed. Hollywood After Dark. Catcan says a lot of Dirty Dan. First off, hey, I see that you popped in there. Let me see your comment here. For me, the true crime doesn't really have the mystery the paranormal stuff does. There's some theory making for the unsolved ones, but it's nothing like piecing together vague stories and legends. Yeah, and it's weird. It's super interesting. I learned pretty quick. I'm not going to say super quick. Probably took me 400 episodes, but people who love true crime love paranormal. People who love paranormal do not always love true crime. So that's that Venn diagram. When I make the podcast, when I started making the podcast, and even today, I make the podcast. What would I want to listen to? What would when I get to work in the morning, I'm like, oh, and I grab my Diet Mountain Dew out of the vending machine. What type of podcast do I want to listen to? And that's Dead Rabbit Radio. And I love paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime. But I learned just producing stuff, making it. That Venn diagram is not as even as I thought it was, which is totally fine, right? You have to make changes on the fly. And I think doing the TikTok true crime gives me my true crime outlet and gives people who love Dead Rabbit Radio a little extra if you love true crime. And if you don't love true crime, then, that's totally fine. Because I've done paranormal on my TikToks. People don't like it. People, they're just not into it. Maybe if I did ghost stories. I've thought about that in October, just doing ghost stories, but no, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, true crime, podcast, paranormal, conspiracy, little bit of true crime. So yeah, you do have that kind of mix. Synapse users, is the Titanic sub a psyop? I don't know. I don't think so. I think that was such a weird story. I talked about this a couple times on the podcast. The reason why we call it news is because it's new. Something we haven't heard before, something we haven't heard about in a long time. If every single day cows were getting mutilated, every single day, and it had been happening for the last 5 years, it would never appear in the newspaper when a cow got mutilated. People wouldn't care. The farmers wouldn't. The farmers would. The idea of 5 very wealthy people in what it really was like a tin can. And I'm not going to go into the science of it. I'm sure it was a little more than a tin can, but to go visit the Titanic and getting trapped, that's bizarre. I don't think that's ever happened ever. So, definitely. And I think the fact too, that they blew up immediately. Had it just turned out that they went down there and it blew up, it would have just have been weird. But the fact that there was this search for them, because the way I was comparing, and I know a lot of people were making comparisons to like migrants crossing in boats and the boats going down, and how come that gets less attention than the people in the submarine. The way I was thinking of it was more of like those. Remember when those boys got caught in that cave and it flooded, and they were in the pitch black, and nobody knew if they were alive, and the divers were like swimming through the cave, and Elon Musk called that one diver a pedophile. You're like, what's going on? Just find the kids. Find the kids. Anyways, that was something that people were watching, or when people get stuck in a coal mine. I think it was in Chile or Bolivia or something like that. It happens all the time, but there goes my news. It doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen. And you're like, are they alive? Like, are they actually, dead under there? Or are they still alive in this horrible condition? They dig them out and all the miners are alive. And then in the cave story, all the miners are alive, but those are kids. That's what I was comparing it to. It was the story not just of a disaster, but hope, right? The idea that there could have been this crazy rescue mission and this thing got brought to the surface and they're unscrewing it really quickly because it was bolted on the outside and the doors pop open and these 5 people come rolling out. That was the story. If they'd blown up instantly, then it would have been weird again, but we would have talked about it for a day and then moved on. I think it was the fact that there was a semblance of hope. Maybe on the darker side, I saw people like, can you imagine how horrible that'd be? They'd be fighting each other in the dark for survival. I mean, there is, I guess, an intrigue in that as well, the darker natures of man. But I think I was thinking of it more like, if they find these guys alive, it'll be like when they find those boys in the cave. And unfortunately, this story did not in that way. I've never heard of Case Coffee Synapse user. I drink coffee from time to time. My favorite coffee is there's a bagel shop in town called Freshies. That's probably the best coffee in town. Gabriel M says, I really like the shorts and the TikToks. Thank you. I'm still trying a lot of times. I don't know if you guys watch the shorts and the TikToks. This happens all the time. I'll be like, you guys won't believe this story. This guy was driving a car, and then all of a sudden another dude walked up with an AK-47. He stuck it in the window, and you guys won't believe this story the other day, and it will end like the last 2 words of the story will get cut out because you have a minute. You have 1 minute, and I'm pretty sure it's actually only like 58 seconds. So I'll be recording it. And a lot of times I do these long intros, which you guys are used to on the podcast. I'll be like, do you believe in reincarnation? I did this one the other day, and I go, do you believe in reincarnation? I don't know if I believe in reincarnation. But if I get reincarnated, I don't know, maybe I'll be reincarnated as like a goat, or maybe I'll be like a Spider-Man. But I don't know if I believe in reincarnation. But here's this story. In India, this woman, 70-year-old woman, was trampled by an elephant. And then she died, obviously, and they were having the funeral pyre for her. And then the elephant showed up and killed her again. And I was listening back to it. I do them in one shot. I do one take. And I go, wait a second, what? No, this doesn't make any sense. Jason, you spend more time. It has nothing to do with reincarnation. What were you talking about? I mean, I was kind of, in my mind, I thought, what if this elephant was a reincarnated like enemy of hers? But I never got to that. I never brought that up. It's a minute long. I spent 20 seconds talking about being reincarnated. Then I say that he killed her again, which grammatically isn't true, but I don't explain we don't know why the elephant came back, but the elephant, like they were burning her body on the funeral pyre, and the elephant showed up out of nowhere and started stepping on her body in the fire, smashing her to bits. And I left out the grossest details, right? And I looked at that and I go, that's good enough. It's only a minute long, right? Get it out there. Put it out there. I have a lot of fun doing them. I usually record those because you'll see me wearing the same shirt in like 7 of them because I record them in an hour. I can record 7 shorts in an hour. They get an insane amount of views. Like I've had shorts that hit like 1 million views. Usually they'll hit about 250,000 views. It may take a bit to ramp up to that. Huge. Like I was stuck at say 25, 30,000 subscribers on YouTube. When I started doing the shorts, I got like 20,000. It was less than that. I think I had like 25,000. Now I'm at 55,000, and I got that last 30,000 so quickly. And I do it. I love it. A Two-Face Productions favorite band or album. Any Dead Rabbit recommends music. First off, Two-Face, thanks for swinging on by. Dead Rabbit Radio recommends the movies because at the very end of the day, it's like 2 hours and it's probably something you never heard of. Music is so subjective. It's so hard. First off, I'll tell you this. My musical tastes are probably about as much as the fact that I'll talk about Transformer movies for a week. I watched really, really bizarre movies that no one's ever seen, like Attack of the Adult Babies, which I watched last night. It was absolutely insane. And it had no babies, had no adult babies attacking people. It was everything else but that. And then I'll watch Transformers and The Flash and Across the Spider-Verse. So my music tastes are kind of like that too. I'll listen to like Olivia Rodrigo or Imagine Dragons or who are those guys who do the Top Gun song? Austin 52. What are those guys who sing the One Republic? One Republic. I'll listen to stuff like that. I have on my Pandora, I listen to like Graduation or Prom Night Radio. So it's just like all the current hits. I like listening to new pop music. The Weeknd, I listen to a lot of Weeknd, Post Malone, stuff like that. Or I'm listening to like Letters to Cleo or Voice of the Beehive, just some weird stuff. What was I listening to the other day? I downloaded a bunch of old songs like Low by Cracker. You guys remember that song? The song's dope. So it's just either the weird, not weird music too, like Brian Jonestown's Massacre, which, I'll listen to them too. They're super weird. But yeah, I either have like really bizarre tastes, really eclectic, like rap music, but it has to be made between like 1992 and 2002. I don't mess with nothing outside of there. Favorite band though, if I had to pick my favorite band, geez, I don't know. Letters to Cleo. Who do I have the most of on my? I'd say like Letters to Cleo or Metallica. If you put me in a corner and wanted me to, my favorite album. I just saw that. I can tell you right now, it's Ice Cube's The Predator, hands down. Like I can easily mark a point in my life where before I listened to Ice Cube's The Predator versus after listening to Ice Cube's album, The Predator. It's complete. Like, I was like, this is the best rap album I've ever heard. And it still holds up. Like, and it obviously came out like I was in high school. I was probably like a junior in high school. So it came out, I know you kind of hold on to music from your age group, but yeah, Ice Cube's The Predator. I absolutely love that album. It's fantastic. Nicole Magenta, thanks for that sweet letter you sent. Yeah, I'm assuming that you signed up for the Patreon. I have a bunch of stickers to mail out. Those are, if you haven't gotten yours yet, I know I'm going to send them out this week. But yeah, when you sign up for the Patreon, you get a letter and a sticker. And that's kind of it. See, that's the thing. Like, that's why I want to reward the Patreons. I love rewarding everybody. I don't like leaving anyone out because I never could support a Patreon. I just don't want people who don't support the Patreon to feel like they're getting less of a show. That's my number one goal. The Patreon supporters, they get like a movie night, and then I take all those videos and I put them in a free YouTube playlist for everyone else. I don't want anyone to ever feel like, oh man, if I supported him, I could listen to the whole podcast, or I feel like I'm actually part of the fluffle. I don't ever want that. Don't want to ever do that. Love your show. Been listening for about a year, looking for more years. You're awesome. Thank you. You're awesome. I can't do the show without you guys, so I'm really really happy that you guys are here. Tito Nitrogen, would you hang out with the Last Podcast Boys if they invited you? 100%. Like, I would hang out. It's so funny because here's the thing. We talk about me interviewing people. Also, here's another interesting thing. I talk about me being a contrarian. When I was in college, my AA is technically in journalism. They didn't have the whole journalism program degree. Anyway, it's a long story, but that was my main area of focus. That's where I got all my credits at, was in journalism. I was a super aggressive interviewer. Like, people hated talking to me. Not friends of mine, but when I walked in to the vice principals or the vice chancellor, whatever it was, Palpatine, no, he's a great person, but the person who was running ARC, American River College at the time, they're like, oh, Jason, not again. Super aggressive interviewer. So I would really have to like step back and not totally be an a-hole. Especially if I'm interviewing somebody who's like, I believe, but I have a tendency to question it if someone tells me a story, I'll be like, that's awesome. I totally believe that. I may not say I totally believe that. Okay, let's back up from that. I have a natural tendency when I'm interviewing somebody to push push a little bit. And so I would have to make sure, because that's kind of messed up, right? If they're coming on, listen, if it's going to be a hostile interview, and if someone wants to come on and talk about flat Earth, which I really don't care about flat Earth, but let's say I wanted to go, let's have a debate about flat Earth. There's obviously going to be a little more hostility there, not personally, not like I don't like the guy, but when you're debating someone, you're trying to move pieces out of place and put your pieces in and things like that. But if I'm just interviewing someone, hey, you want to come on this Ghost with Paranormal podcast? They're like, yeah, sure. And then I'm like, oh, really? So what does your family have any history of mental illness? Like stuff like that. Like, I wouldn't want to do that. I wouldn't want to do that. But would I hang out with the Last Podcast Boys? Yeah, totally. There's this podcast called, I always forget them when I'm put on the spot. It's these three guys, Blackheart Cinema, Blackheart Movies. Oh, dang it. Every single time I'm doing a live stream, they talk about movies. I do that podcast. I think it would just be fun to like hang out, right? To be part of another creator's thing. I think it'd be awesome. I don't know though if Last Podcast on the Left has guests. Again, do you want to mess with that vibe? If you're sitting there and you're like, we're chilling, we got this thing going. Hey, let's invite this fourth dude over that none of us really know. It can throw people, and like we may not jive, right? Like, what do you have a history of mental illness? They're like, what? You're invited on our show. Why are you being like that? So, Synapse user says you can use Discord as a call-in. That may be true. Like, I have looked into radio services or call-in services. I think that was kind of before the podcast. I was looking into that, and it might have been after the podcast. I was kind of looking into that. It's possible. I think with the call-in thing, like I said earlier, I can't stand it when I'm listening to a podcast and the audio quality is different between speakers. That drives me absolutely bonkers. There was I remember once I found a podcast and I love director commentaries. Long-time listeners of the show know I love inside baseball, not actually baseball, but I love hearing about how the sausage is made, all the metaphors. There was a podcast, I don't mean to put this dude on blast, I don't remember the name of it, but there was a podcast where my hair is totally dry, it was wet earlier. There was a podcast about a guy who was interviewing true crime authors about the books they wrote. I was like, dude, this is dope. Are you kidding me? I love true crime so much. This was before Dead Rabbit Radio. And so I downloaded a couple episodes because I'd read so many true crime books. I was like, oh, I remember that book. Oh, I remember that. Da, 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 da. And I couldn't listen to it. The podcaster, his mic was perfectly fine. But then it would cut to the author, and I was like, oh, anyways, the case was that he made him with a baseball bat. So a baseball bat, you say, well, how did the DNA evidence come out? Well, the DNA evidence. Well, it's like, I can't listen to this, dude. I can't listen to this for 2 hours. No matter how good the information was, the quality wasn't there, and I had to just completely download it. So that would be the thing, too. What's up, Drunk Bob? I'm getting dabbed on by 3 emojis. Do I have a favorite cryptid? Mac and Cheese says. Do I have a favorite cryptid? That's a really tough question. That's actually a really tough question. I'm going to default. I love Mormon Bigfoot. I hate sea monsters, so we'll get those guys off the table. Loch Ness Monster, he's cool, like imagery wise, but I think they're boring. I think sea monsters they just swim around and stuff like that. There was a time, let's go back to exports setting the table, right? They're the ones who dictate really what's going to be the new thing in paranormal lore. The Skinwalkers, like I remember reading about that stuff back in like 2011, 2012. And it's probably before that too. I know the legend of the Skinwalker. Like I remember when I first saw all these Skinwalker threads, I was like, that's an old timey like Native American thing. But the idea of like the smell of the copper pennies, and they're like imitating people, and they're talking the voices, and they're trying to get it just right. I was reading all those stories on X, and I was like, oh man, dude, this stuff's insane. This is so good. And now that's part of paranormal lore. Like that's just a given cryptid out there. Got it started on the X board. or at least blew up on the export. It does set the table. Love it or hate it, and I like the export. Um, they set the table, right? I know people. I think people's big problem with the export is that it's associated with 4chan, and again, it's better to think of it as a separate entity. It's 4channel, and then underneath that is the X board. If you separate it out, the board itself is completely. It does say what's going on in the world of paranormal right now. But those old stories about the skinwalkers, the shapeshifters, the party of 10 people going up there, and all of a sudden there's 11 people and they can't figure out which one is which. Those are fantastic stories, experiences. You decide. Mormon Bigfoot, I always loved reading those stories about the shapeshifters. The crawler, which I didn't even know existed until I saw it twice. I did an episode on that. And I think really like any story where people are getting shapeshifted and turning into the cryptid. But then also, like, again, that's such a hard question. It's a good question. It's such a hard question because the one, just like out of 1,100 episodes, one of the stories that keeps popping in my head is one about I think it was in Colombia or Brazil. It was a woman who was cheating with a priest who got cursed to become a mule. And I don't think about it, out of 1,100 episodes, I cannot go into this much detail about most of these stories. So, woman was cheating with a priest. She got cursed to become a mule or a horse with no head but flames shooting out of it. And she would run up and down the street late at night, like in the wilderness, like these jungle roads, and she would trample you to death. The only way you could avoid her is if anything that was shiny on you, even your teeth, even the glimmer in your eyes, you had to be like face down in the mud so she couldn't see you. But again, there's a wild horse tromping around the wilderness. Laying down on the ground doesn't sound like the best way to avoid it. I love that story. Again, it's one of those stories that it's a cryptid that has a clear origin story, which a lot of times we don't get that. It's just like this is this beast in the woods. This is this pig man running around rooting through people's garbage and attacking teenagers. Like, we don't know where it came from. Sometimes you get cryptids like the Billowhack monster broke out of a research facility, or who was the one who fell out of a circus freak train accident crash, and he was also like a goat man. I like them. I really like cryptid stories. The thing is there was a time where we were doing a ton of cryptid stuff, and this was one of the time. I think I've talked about this in one of the behind the scenes episodes. And I hope this isn't boring to you guys. I know we're kind of doing a lot of like behind the scenes stuff, but I thought I was running out of stories for the podcast. This would have been around episode 300. I was like, oh no, am I running out? At this point, I've kind of refined my research, and I found this website called Cryptopia. And it had all these cryptids, and I ran really heavy cryptid season. I think it was like 50 episodes, or there's a cryptid story in each one. And I said, you got to stop. You got to stop. You can't be doing so many cryptids. Now I try to like vary it up, right? If you look at episodes, I try not to have 2 ghost stories in an episode. I usually do, if I do any, 1 true crime story a week. It usually is on a Wednesday or a Thursday because they tend to be depressing. So it doesn't ruin your weekend. It's not the first episode you hear in the week. It's not the last episode you hear before the weekend. I went really heavy on the cryptids for a while. The Sheep Slayer, the Bolivian Sheep Slayer. I think that either ran as a repeat or it's going to run as a retro rabbit this weekend. That was kind of the beginning of that cryptid heavy thing. I do like them. I think I've covered a lot of the really cool ones, but I know there's so many more out there that I don't know about. And I'll cover them when I find them. We actually have a really cool cryptid coming out of Malaysia. I think we're going to be doing that story this week. And I found out about it. Some guy's dog got brutally killed by this something. And is it Coast to Coast AM, I think, the article, and it said he was killed by this block. And I didn't know what it was. And I went and looked it up, and I found this really cool, the lore behind this creature. So we'll be covering that soon. But yeah, I do like cryptids. There's a lot of them. In just out of themselves as a forklift driver. But they said they only use 1 earbud, so that's probably a good way. Nicole Magenta says, do you like David Paulides? I need to learn how to pronounce his name. I know that. I don't dislike him at all. I think he has done a lot. Again, export, set the table. Those books are out of print. Missing 411 was an out of print series of books. They were going for 100, if not more. to buy one of these books. They weren't available in electronic copies or anything like that. The exports started talking about missing 411 all the time. They brought that shit back. Those books are older. Those all that research is older research. I don't want to. It's like 90s, 80s to 90s. These books went out of print. I think he's totally fine. I think he's totally fine. I don't have any ill will towards him. I did an episode or two where I've cracked a couple of jokes. I know that he starts off his video saying this video is copyright protected. You can't. And I think I started off one of my episodes joking like that, and then I did like it's he is. I don't think he's a fraud. I don't think that he has any sort of ill intent in the community. There might be other people who do have that, but I don't think so. I think that he does that. I've heard, and I kind of talked about it on the podcast before, I've heard that if you look at earlier versions of the work, and I've never done this myself, because the books were so expensive, I believe they've gone down in price now, and now he's doing a podcast, stuff like that. I've heard that originally 411 led more towards it was Bigfoot doing it. And now he goes, I don't know what it is, which honestly is the better answer. The better answer is to go, I don't know what this phenomenon is. Something's going on. People are missing in these national parks. I don't know what it is. No, I think he's totally fine. I've never really sat back and listened to his podcast, but it's not because I've listened to segments. I think when I was doing the episode, I was watching one of his YouTube videos, but he's definitely not someone who I think is a bad actor in the community. He seems personally fine. I think his theory of missing a 411 again is super intriguing. How much of it is true? How much of it is cherry picking information? I mean, that's, you can look at any story like that, anything where he goes, well, here's all the missing person cases that we can't explain. Here's a bunch that we can, and there's some similarities between these ones and these ones, but I'm just going to dismiss them. Everybody does that. I do believe that his heart's in the right place. I don't have problem with people making money. I know I've said kind of stuff about grifters in the community. I don't have any problem with people making money in the paranormal community. David Pauletti's, however you pronounce his name, doing speaking tours, selling books, stuff like that. There's nothing wrong with that. You're going to make money in the community. I think my problem is when you trump up something is false, or you've made up, and then sell it as a real thing. Like I was talking about Gaia. This was a long time ago. That guy who said he was reincarnated an Atlantean warrior. I don't believe that for a sec. I don't believe it. I think he's making it up. Hey, I mean, I guess legally I shouldn't say. Well, I didn't say his name, so that's not illegal, right? I think if someone's saying something that's not true for a financial benefit, that's just fraud. That's fraud. So I think the funniest thing, listen, there's never, you can get it wrong, right? Remember my whole thing with Forrest Finn? He didn't bury no treasure. That Forrest Finn thing to me, that's classic Dead Rabbit Radio. That's classic me. First off, it was there wasn't even the main topic of that episode. The main topic is always the last story. So that one, it was the Shadow People invasion. It was like personal ghost stories. And the first one, I was just like, oh yeah, I found this treasure. We buried this treasure, whatever it was. And I go, I don't think he really buried it. I think he just wants to get his word out. He's an old man who wrote a book about his life, and he just wants people to read it. So anyways, let's go on with the Shadow People thing. And then everyone came after me, dude. I was like, what? So again, now my defenses are up. So it was like 2-3 days later, I was like, you guys are a cult. You guys are sexually attracted to Forrest Finn. I went out, dude. I was on these guys. I haven't listened to an episode in years, but I listened to it a couple times when it came out. Obviously editing and stuff like that. And I think I was like, I gotta go back and listen to the episode. I think I did edit out 1 or 2 things at the very last minute, or maybe even after it was released, because I think I got some legal advice. They're like, you can't actually say that. You can't say that. You can say all this other stuff. And then I was wrong. See, here's the thing. Like, to me, that's classic Dead Rabbit Radio and really classic Jason Carpenter. Make a statement, double down, triple down, find out I'm wrong, and then it's even funnier. Like, to me, it was the funniest part. That was the funniest part. Beatrice, longtime listener to the show, she messaged me on Twitter. She never meant to talk to me before. She messaged me and she goes, Forrest Finn's treasure was found. I go, what? That was the best ending to that story. The fact that I was so publicly wrong made it 10 times funnier. That's what I love. That's absolutely what I love about that. I went to, and then the fact that they didn't believe it, they didn't believe that that was the real treasure. I was like, you guys are idiots. Just come on. Love it. Absolutely loved it. I heard Rubicon, thanks for joining. I heard drinking a beer helps finding ghosts. They call alcohol spirits for a reason. Just don't drink too much. You know, I I see that would be so when I'm looking for reports, when I'm reading stuff online, um, and people start off by saying me and my friends were drinking a couple beers, or me if they said me and my friends are drinking a couple beers, the belief factor for me drops a bit. It really goes down a little bit, and they got to earn that back. If they say, "Oh, we were smoking a doobie," then now it's a lot harder because I know that when I used to use marijuana, I would like hallucinate. You go, Jason, that wasn't because you were smoking. It was because you were smoking it out of a soda can. You're breathing in aluminum. I don't know about that. Um, I mean, you could argue that. I just think that if you did have an experience and you would have, even with the, let's say you and your buddies had a couple of beers, you went out ghost hunting, you guys all experienced something. Even your buddies probably won't, they'll be like, well, dude, we had a couple of beers. Like, what was that? Like, I think it diminishes the, even the proof you could give yourself. Cause if it was really mind bending, you can go, well, I did have a couple of beers. Maybe that wasn't thing. That's for, and a safety thing, right? If you're having a couple of drinks and then you're going to be tromping out in the woods or you're going to be illegally trespassing, I just don't personally think it's the safest thing to do. YouTube, thank you so much for the live stream donation. I'll be giving you a shout out in a future episode for that. And the question, and I'll get back to the other questions in between this one and the chat. What do you think about psychic spiritualists? And do you believe you are one based on your multitude of once in a lifetime experiences? I love that last comment because that is, I always say I have a hard time believing this story because they have all these once in a lifetime experiences. I do that. I go, sometimes I'll disregard, like, let's say I'm finding stories. Listen, I hate Reddit as a whole. I don't like the karma system. I don't like the fact that they hide these disgusting communities and in some cases promote them. They've gotten better at that, but they have a really sordid past of actually promoting really, really damaging communities. You get a lot of first person paranormal experiences from people who have never told these stories to anyone else. And unlike the export, I can then check their posting history. And that is such a benefit. It's such a time saver because then I can look and go, oh, this person told this story that it's absolutely insane. It's fascinating. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and a mystery, and all this stuff. And then I look through their posting history, and they've had 10 such experiences in the past year. Just like the drinking thing, I have to go, does this now, my skepticism level is much, much, much higher. So the point that I will often bookmark those and archive them and then just throw them into a set of bookmarks I have called 14th Family, which is just all my paranormal research. These are things that I'll probably never cover on the show. These are things that if I ever have to go, because sometimes I've had to go back, like I'll be like, I remember reading something about this, that, or the other thing, and I'll have to find the bookmark. But I go, that I don't think this is real, just based on the fact that all of these are once in a lifetime experiences. They're all happening to the same person. So Mewtwo is basically saying the same thing about your multitude of once in a lifetime experiences. I will say, with my experiences, what I see happening differently than other people is they don't generally have a middle, a beginning, and an end. They're usually very anticlimactic. Does that make a difference? To me, it does. Like if someone is telling the story about their dog got possessed, and then like the dog's flying around the room, and then the priest comes in, he's in this blessing, and like the house caught on fire, and they all ran out. And they've told that story, told different versions of these once in a lifetime experiences. I was like, this is made up. That's kind of my, but again, obviously I have a bias. They're the stories that I experienced, but a lot of my stories they go in there and just stopped. I never saw it again. They're like, what? I was like, yeah, just went away. Do I think what do I think about psychic spiritualists, and do you believe you are one though? No, I don't think that anything that I experience or anything that I do is nothing that anyone else can't do. What am I trying to say? I think that if I can do it, you can do it. Um, I think that there probably are people who have special ability. I know there are people out there who have special abilities. Just like I know there are people out there who are expert investors. There are people who just know how to do the stock market. They've studied it for years. There's still chance and there's still a possibility of loss, but they know it well. But then there's also scams, right? Just like you can have someone take your money and scam you and run this whole like Bernie Madoff type of operation. There's people who can look like they know what they're doing as far as being a psychic or a spiritualist, and they're just scamming you. And I think that is the hard thing to figure out: who is the real psychic and who's the scam. That's the question of what we're looking at here. Who's the psychic and who's the scam? And the problem is I think there's more scams than legit psychics. And every time you catch a scammer, it ruins the legit psychics in everyone else's eyes. I think most legit psychics are like, I'm not actually going to try to prove that I have this power to you because I can't. I'm just going to do it. And I have this select group of people that I offer my services to, or maybe I don't offer them to anyone. Maybe it's just a skill that I have. But I don't think there's anything special or psychic about me. I don't think that. Why I've had such weird experiences, I don't know. I didn't start having them until I was 18. I don't think it's because I'm anyone special or because I have anything special. I think, if anything, right place, right time, or wrong place, wrong time. If you grew up in my area, you were living in that same house, had those same jobs, was interested in ghosts and doing ghost hunts, I think you would have the same experiences. I don't think there's anything special about me. Dirty dances, there are almost no haunted places near me. Can I just arrange rocks in a circle or something? I mean, technically, you could make the place haunted if you wanted to. I don't recommend it. You could start messing around with the Ouija boards, summoning spells. Someone posted the other day, and it's interesting. I don't know if I'm going to do an episode on this because it's hard to do an episode on the lack of something. Someone posted the other day, I read this: how come there are no haunted houses in Israel? And this guy was like, listen, I don't necessarily believe in ghosts, but I find it, this person's from Israel. They go, I find it super weird that there's 0 haunted places in Israel. And he goes, there's haunted houses in Tel Aviv. No, not Tel Aviv. There's haunted places in Jerusalem. He said, he goes, there's haunted places in Jerusalem and nowhere else. I was like, what? So I went and I started looking for haunted places in Israel. And sure enough, the only, like, there'll be like this temple in Jerusalem or this place in Jerusalem or da 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 da. There have been ghost sightings, but in the country of Israel, there are no haunted places outside of a few spots in Israel. Super weird, especially if you think about the history of that place. The people have been there for thousands of years. People are there today. So how come there are no ghosts? It's funny because we did an episode not too long ago about an alien invasion in Israel, where it was like over the course of 2 months, you had like this 7-foot tall alien that was kicking dogs through walls and mesmerizing people. And I was like, this is, considering the fact, this idea that aliens are out there and they're shutting down nuclear silos, how come we don't see more aliens in the Middle East? How come we don't see more UFOs in the Middle East? And I did that episode and people said, it's kind of a different culture, right? The people over there, they may not be looking at UFOs, they may not be caring about UFOs, or they may classify it as a religious experience. But it was an interesting story, and sure enough, what is this now? Like, I think that episode was like an hour and a half ago. I mean, a year and a half ago. I found another. It's like, again, 2 months of insane these aliens landed in Israel, and they do the same thing. Not literally the same thing. They're like taking over people's bodies, and it's so weird. It's like Israel has 0 haunted houses. That dude was right about that. And 0 ghost activity. I mean, 0 alien activity. But when it does have alien activity, it's the most insane. And it's just like, it was like night after night after night after night in this region, and people weren't talking about it. Well, apparently, if I remember correctly, I haven't written the notes up, but people were experiencing all this stuff. And it wasn't until a UFO investigator got tipped off that he tied all this stuff together because you had people in different areas of the country experience similar events night after night after night, but this stuff wasn't being reported widely. It was just going on. Crazy, crazy stuff. Let's see here. A Synapse user, would you suggest summoning? You'll have to mispronounce. You'll have to excuse me if I mispronounce this word. Goetic demons or Enochian, and I think that's the word. Enochian angels. You know what? I think it would be. Cat cans. I'm super done with Reddit. I think that you guys are now just bragging on Reddit. I'm just getting to those. So, anyways, I would be careful when you're summoning something. It would be the same thing like this. Would you say, should I invite a lion into my house? Should I have a lion, an adult lion, as a pet? My question to you would be, what experience do you have? Are you like a lion tamer? Did you grow up in a house with lions? Do you know how to not only take care of a lion, but know how to read the temperament of a lion? If you knew those things, if you go, yeah, no, I used to be a lion tamer for a couple of years. I did it. And then I got a degree in a mechanical engineering, did that for a while. And now I'm retired and I want to own a lion. Do you think that's a good idea? I'd be like, yeah, I guess. I mean, as long as you can afford to feed it. It sounds like you know a lot about taking care of lions. That would be my thing. If someone goes, I want to summon a demon or I want to summon an angel, my question would be, what skills have you worked on up to this point to do that? What it's not just about safety. I mean, like, you have to have very good psychic defenses. You have to have a very good sense of self. You have to be able to know everything about you and how you operate as a human before you start inviting anything into your space. You have to have you practice all of these banishing rituals. Do you know them by heart? If something goes wrong, can you immediately take care of it? That is how it would go. And I mean, I'm just kind of glossing over it. There's a lot of stuff that comes into the idea. People read in a book. I'm not saying that this is you, but people will read in a book about how to summon something, and they'll start drawing you should not even draw the symbols until you know exactly what those symbols mean, where they come from, know the history of the ritual you are going to do. Where did it come from? Who wrote it? When was it written? What was the culture like back then? These are all things you need to know, because if something goes sideways, it's not as simple as grabbing a fire extinguisher and spraying it. It's almost like, think about it this way: if your kitchen caught on fire, if you stove a little fire in the stove, you could spray with a fire extinguisher, it's done. If there's an electrical fire, if you start seeing fires shoot out of the wall socket and you spray the wall socket, you still got to call the fire department. Because for all you know, the flames are inside the house. The wiring is burning somewhere deeper in the house. You ever have an electrical fire, you have to call the fire department. They know what to do. I know now the metaphor might kind of be getting out of my, kind of losing a bit of the loop. But what I'm saying is, before you do it, you have to know everything about it. You have to know everything. You know how to stop it. What did you do before? What are you going to do after? And you have to have it all memorized. If you don't have a banishing ritual memorized, a summoning ritual memorized, different banishing rituals memorized, all this stuff, then don't do it. It's the same thing as inviting a lion into your house, having zero experience. Well, I read a book about lions. I saw The Lion King. And again, I'm not saying that that's you, but there are people who do that. There are people who start writing out rituals and drawing stuff in notebooks and things like that, and they have no idea what any of this stuff means, or more importantly, how to get rid of it. You have to know all of that stuff. Mac and Cheese says, went to St. Augustine for spring break and a bunch of ghost hunting stuff, and just taking in the experience was kind of otherworldly. Yeah, I like having ghost hunting's fun, and it's actually one of those things you can do pretty much anywhere except Israel, apparently. You can always kind of hang out and explore, and you can meet locals as long as they're not insane. They're like, yeah, we know where to take you, Dyer Lane. You're like, oh no, as long but it's just, and I think it's a good social activity. I think you can meet people, and you can become a paranormal researcher and get out there and add to the knowledge. Like, you may have stuff in your community that nobody else has, and it's just It's fun. I really enjoy it. But yeah, you're like just interested to say, don't summon demons. But now you're saying go to places where ghosts exist. Oh, it's just fun. Just go out there, meet some strangers, go out there. It's all dicey. But I think invoking them is different than walking through a haunted graveyard. But again, I could be wrong on that. Nicole Magenta, what do you love about Citrus Heights the most? Citrus Heights is where I spend a lot of my days. Um, Birdcage Walk, Birdcage Mall, I think is what it's called now. I would spend hours there. I'd spend hours there. It's just an open air mall. They had a Starbucks, a Barnes and Noble. Like when I roll out there, I'm going to Sacramento for a couple of weeks pretty soon. I'll go there. I'll go out to Citrus Heights, be hanging out at Birdcage Walk, walking around the mall. It was cool. Like you just walk around Best Buy. I was one of those guys, listen, that I never had a lot of money. So I would, this is because this is nuts. I would go to Best Buy and they had a PC set up that had the demo of like Call of Duty 2 or Call of Duty 1 or something like that. And I would go to Best Buy and I would just play the demo and I'd be there for like a half hour. No one buy nothing because I didn't have no money. And I was bored, so I'd go and I would play Call of Duty on the demo computer. And I remember I did that a lot. I didn't do it every day, but I did it. I was like, oh, dude, I can't wait. To play Call of Duty. I'd walk. It's like a 3-4 mile walk just to get there. And I play Call of Duty, and then eventually they either sold the laptop or they got tired of seeing me in there going, bashing the keyboard. But no, Birdcage, that was my favorite place. But it's hard to say. I was all over that place. Fair Oaks Park and the little library, all that stuff. Drunk Bob, thanks for joining us in here. Snooky Ariga, hey, love you. We're in Puerto Rico on the beach at a bar outside watching you on the big screen. Woo, yeah, they're gone. Actually, that comment was a while ago. But if not, yay. I've done a couple stories in, I don't know how to pronounce it, Puerto Rico. There's some weird alien stuff down there. I wonder, like, how, I mean, I guess it's kind of, this is where my geography is dicey. It's kind of near the Bermuda Triangle, right? Isn't it nowhere near there? Kinda, right? If you were like an alien, and you were like flying around, you'd stop there. But no, that's awesome. And I'm on a big screen television set, so that's dope. They're seeing all my haunted doll and my little gingerbread man guy. People think that this owl's haunted. When I put this owl up, I knew I'd get grief because it's like an Illuminati symbol or it's a satanic symbol. I was like, whatever, I like it. But I do get YouTube comments about it. El Pato's rolling in. El Pato, a longtime listener of the show. The duck, is that what Pato means? Is the duck? I think we've had this conversation before. But it's okay. Wish you could have joined earlier. Thought it wasn't happening. So was I late? I said 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Like a couple people have said, and I'm not blaming you. I'm just wondering, did I say something wrong on the podcast? I'll feel bad. I'll feel bad. That's interesting. So this is super interesting because earlier we were talking about consistency. We were talking, and was that Tito? Yeah. We were talking about consistency. El Pato says, my stepfather-in-law recently told a story of a haunted home he used to live in. Supposedly, you could see the spirits if you turned on a single light at a specific time. So again, we get that. Like we will have phenomenon that you can track, that you can actually say this happens when this happens, and then other stuff just seems like it's on no particular timetable, but maybe it is. Like that's the weirdest thing about the paranormal. And anyone who tells you they know everything about the paranormal, I'm not saying they're lying, but I think they're mistaken because we don't know what causes this stuff. Now, obviously, as a paranormal researcher, I think any of us would want to go to El Pato's stepfather-in-law's house. I guess he doesn't live in it anymore, but we would want to turn that light on at a specific time. But that sounds super spooky. That sounds actually so creepy. Because you think if you don't turn the light on at that specific time, is it still standing there in the darkness, like looking at you? Like, does the light make it appear, or does the light simply make it visual? That's the creepy part. Wow, a bunch of comments. I didn't see those guys down there. Let's see here. Corey, thanks for joining us. Really, really appreciate it. Let's see here. There is, I don't want to go too much into it on the live stream, but we're going to be doing an update to the monkey stuff. We did that at like episode 50. There's, if you BBC just read a big article. I got recommended that story by one of the Instagram guys. I'll give you a shout out on the podcast. I don't have your name written down just yet. I have it in my notes, but um, yeah, BBC just broke open one of those monkey things, and it may involve. Never mind. We'll just do the episode. I don't. We just do the episode. Let's see here. Cat Can says you were the OG of the icebergs. 100 YouTubers have gotten paid from your work. That's just the way it works. Like, I love doing the stuff. I loved covering the icebergs the way that I covered them. And here's the thing: when you add to the paranormal culture, when you're part of paranormal research, are other people going to use your research? Yes, and that's awesome. That's totally awesome. If a YouTuber wants to take some of my, listen, I would appreciate credit. I would, but if a YouTuber is going to take, if a YouTuber takes the stuff that you discovered and then talks about it in a video, that is both of us pushing forward the world of conspiracy theory, the world of paranormal. Like it would be lame if nobody did that. The thing with the conspiracy theory iceberg in YouTube is that obviously I'm talking about like Parallel Pipes and Wendy Goon and all of these other people who've done this. Now there's all sorts of icebergs out there. You have Mr. GG doing these. I did an audio podcast on a visual medium. I was doing a podcast, not a YouTube. Parallel Pipes, Wendy Goon, Mr. GG, all these other guys who do these conspiracy theory topics. They're putting out videos on a video medium. That's why they blew up. They were doing it properly. They were doing it the way they should have done it. I had no interest, and I still don't have a lot of interest in editing video. So I think it's awesome. I don't know if Mr. GG's ever specifically mentioned me. I know Parallel Pipes mentioned me. I know Parallel Pipes and Wendy Goon and other people who've done conspiracy theory content. Wendy Goon, I think he mentioned me. I think he might have. He did shoot me out a YouTube comment a long time ago saying, hey, you seem to know a lot about this internet iceberg conspiracy stuff. Maybe we should work together. I was on vacation. I didn't see the YouTube comment in time, right? So Wendy Goon definitely reached out to me. He definitely is aware of Dead Rabbit Radio. There's been a ton of people who put out these iceberg content. They've used my material. Awesome. Do it. That's why I put it in the show notes. That's why I include all this stuff, because I want more people to talk about this. I don't want to put out content and be like, but nope, this podcast is copyright Jason Carpenter. I mean, it is technically copyright Jason Carpenter, but good. I'm glad. Now, again, like my feelings on the internet conspiracy theory iceberg has changed because I look at it as who created this thing in the first place. Is it a psyop? But the idea of hundreds of YouTubers getting paid for my work, I'm totally fine with that. I think it's awesome. I do think it's awesome. I think it would be ridiculous to say, oh no, I researched, because they would have found it anyways, right? There, none of the conspiracy theories or anything like I didn't make it up, right? If I'm talking about golf rumors and they're talking about golf rumors and they watched my video on it, or maybe they didn't, maybe they just looked at the same links that I did. I don't know. But I'm glad that, because it's forwarding the narrative. I think it's dope, actually, honestly. And again, had I done videos back then, could the YouTube channel have been bigger? Yeah. I mean, obviously, we look at the people who did do that. But is that the content that I wanted to do? No, I wanted to do a daily podcast. And that's where I'm at. And I look back and I go, we've covered over 2,000 stories over the course of these 5 years. So again, comparison is the theft of joy. And I definitely I think it's awesome. I don't look at them and go, what? They have so many subscribers. No, that's awesome. Because what that also shows you is that shows you how deep the pool is for conspiracy theory and paranormal content. If all of us doing this, if us, me and you, Last Podcast on the Left, Wendy Goon, Mysterious Universe, if we only had 100 people listening to our material, then that means nobody's interested in this. But the fact that some of us have 100 people and some of us have 1 million people, that just shows that there's so many people that are hungry for this content. I love it. I've heard people make the reason why the cat cans comment made me laugh. I heard people made that comment like that before, and again, that's part of doing research. A scientist can look at another scientist's research and go, oh no, yeah, that I don't have to do that research. That's already been done. I'm going to add on top of this. It's just totally normal, and that's the way that I look at it. Bex J, what about all these YouTubers that have suddenly started doing live streaming all at the same time to the point of exhaustion? Did YouTube set those cogs running? Here's the thing. I'll tell you. I don't know exactly what. Hey, Madcap Bedlam, glad you showed up. What did I miss? Just a lot of behind the scenes stuff. Hopefully, it's entertaining. Here, I'll tell you this. Like, there have been YouTubers. This isn't in the conspiracy theory community. I don't know exactly what that's a reference to, but I'll listen to a YouTuber. You have a tight 12, right? You have a tight 14 where you consistently put out these videos that are like 14 minutes long, comedy skits or whatever. They're on point. You watch them. And there's this pretty standard thing where you'll see someone, they'll start out putting out pretty tight content. And then they get to a point where they realize H3's done this. Danny Gonzalez does this to a point, but he still puts out his tight 14. You have these videos, and then eventually you go, wait a second. This is a highly edited, structured work that takes weeks to do, and I send it off to an editor and all this stuff. Or I can do a live stream or a podcast where I talk unedited for right now an hour and 15 minutes. Like in this amount of time that it's talked, I would be halfway done with an episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. It takes me probably about 30 minutes usually to get all my notes together. First off, finding the stories is the hardest part, but then I write the notes. That's 30 minutes. I record for an hour, so it's an hour and a half, and then it takes about 2 hours to edit it. So the entire process is 3.5, 4 hours for one episode of content. Or I can just talk off the cuff for an hour and 50 minutes. See, for me, I find the podcast far more interesting than I love interacting with you guys. But as far as like content wise, I would not want to put out a 2-hour live stream every single day. You think about how rambly this has been. And most of this, we've been talking about stuff from the podcast. You guys asking questions about this, that, or the other thing from the podcast or from, so you need it to build off of. That's why you'll have people keep putting out these videos, and all of a sudden, it's not a negative thing. Some people do want to do their type 14 and then just go, I'm going to do a gaming channel. I'm just going to play games. And I have a fan base. I have 34,000 followers. That's not enough. I have 300,000 followers. Now I'm going to move to Twitch and play Minecraft for 4 hours a night. And you're going to get maybe 10% of those people over. So you got 30,000 people watching you on Twitch. As far as a consumer and as far as a creator, that's not what I want to do, but I get why people do that. I totally get it. It's way easier. Let's see. So Synapse user said, hey, Jason, remember when Wendigoon commented on your channel? That was in reference to that. Do you think he's a psyop? No, I don't think he's a psyop. I don't think he's a psyop at all. I think that he leveraged, again, X sets the board. X sets the board in conspiracy theory. He took the iceberg, which is a list of topics in a very intriguing order, and some of them you know a lot about and some of them you don't, and he did long form videos on it. Now see, that wasn't the I'm just going to sit and do a live stream for hours. His stuff is edited, his stuff is researched. He's not just talking off the cuff. He took content that people were curious about, and we've seen Wendigoon do it successfully along with many others using the conspiracy theory iceberg. We've seen people do the backrooms, turn backrooms into video games. Slenderman, I think might have kind of predated. That was like from another website, but backrooms was really boosted by X. And you see people go, oh, people are talking about this. People are talking about it consistently, and now it's leaking out of X. I'm going to cover that. I don't think he's a psyop. That's the short answer. I think that he saw something that was super interesting to him, that he could figure that was super interesting to other people, and made videos on a video website about it, which the Google algorithm was perfect for, because the Google algorithm, or just the algorithm in general, search engine in general, was putting subtitles on all of his episodes and then searches those. The podcast searchability, discoverability is awful. It's so bad. It's like having, remember that show Max Headroom where they had like 400 channels? Well, I guess you don't have to remember that. That's television nowadays. Podcasting, it's really hard to find anything. And to be honest, like I don't do the best about it, but I don't want to have my titles be full of SEO words. I'd rather have a title like The Shadows. It's evocative to me. I'd rather have a title. They say you should have a title called The Shadows, demons and shadow people invade the home or invade homes or something like that. So it has these SEO words in it. But I think it looks cluttered personally. I just like The Shadows. So, again, maybe I could do stuff that would promote the show more. Yeah, it's simple title changes. But no, I don't think he's a psyop. I think that what we were talking about, the level of psyops is, I think you would have to be huge, like super huge, like an Alex Jones level guy. I don't think that the feds would really bother with people who weren't bringing in. And here's, like, you would have to be like, again, Joe Rogan level. The culture is so saturated. The FBI, the CIA would have to be paying off thousands of content creators. Now, I could be wrong, but if you're specifically asking me, do I think he's a psyop? I don't think so. I think he's a savvy guy who saw something he was interested in, which is key number one, right? You can't do it on something you're bored on, and something that he figured other people were interested in. And he goes, I'm just going to make these videos about it. And he did it in such a way that people would watch the first one and they'd go, oh, the next tier's coming out, basically marketed itself. But I never wanted to go through each particular one. I wanted to do the ones that I never heard of. And that's the thing with Dead Rabbit Radio. I want to cover stuff nobody's talking about. I don't want to do an episode on the Bermuda Triangle. Don't want to do an episode about the Winchester Mystery House. Not that those aren't cool, but I think they've been done to death. So it's just kind of a different thing. Let's see here. But yeah, no. So I don't think he's a psyop. And he did reach out in my comments. Like, that was really dope. He definitely didn't need to do that. He was bigger than me when he did that. So that was really awesome. Let's see. Pamela, I'm glad. Pamela said, new to the channel, enjoying this. Good. I'm glad that you're enjoying this, the 5th anniversary special. And for many more years, we hope. Strange Pathways, welcome to the chat. Quick question: was recordings of Earth First ever used? If so, what episode? So that's funny, because I was just thinking about that the other day. This is an insight into me as a person. A long time ago, I did an episode where the very last minute before the episode came out, I was taking a shower. The episode was getting recorded that night. And I had this inspiration as I was taking a shower where I wanted to give a speech to the assembled armies of Earth, where I was like, Earth first, Earth first. It was dope. It was an episode we were spent the whole episode on Mars looking at these weird Martian conspiracy theories. And it was like 7 p.m. at night. The episode was due that night because I like to have them done by like 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time the next morning, right? So the episodes, they do release on Thursday night, but technically I consider them Friday's episode. I was like, well, let's do it. So I walked around my apartment, standing in different ports. I go, Earth, Mike's sitting there, and I'm like, Earth first. Then I walk over here. I go, Earth first, Earth first. But I'm trying not to be too loud to my neighbors. I'm like, what the hell's going on over there? Then I go, what would be great is to have a remastered version of this. So I asked everyone to send in themselves chanting Earth first, Earth first. And I got a lot of you guys to send those audio samples to me, and I thing with them. They're just sitting in my email address. That was honestly like 2 years ago when that happened. See, my original plan was, dude, I should take this to a local studio in town and have them mix it. And what happened with part of it was, it would honestly take me probably an afternoon to do this myself. But the show is just so hard to put out. Anything extra, like I love doing those Dead Rabbit Radio classics where I give behind the scenes. Those will return. Those may be something that I only have during the summer, because I always go, oh, they'll be back, man. They'll come back this, and I don't do them. They're just too much extra work. It's an extra 2 hours, the next 2.5 hours. I gotta like record this, and it has to be interesting. I started doing the Dead Rabbit Radio classics for my last break. The first one was really cool, a lot of good background information. The second one was dumb. I was like, dude, this is a waste of my time and yours. I'm not going to release something that's garbage. So I was like, no, I'm not going to do them this time. But so that will appear on a Dead Rabbit Radio Classics episode, and I'll re-release the episode. But no, you didn't miss it. That you didn't miss it. Cat Can says that's what I like about you, Jason. Basically, do what you want. Algorithms be damned. It's funny because it's a double-edged. I appreciate that. It's a double-edged sword because um, on the one hand, I cover stuff that no one else is talking about, but because no one else is talking about it, no one else is searching for it. So it does, and podcasts are so hard to discover in the first place. But again, like, could you imagine if I started doing like today's episode? I'm not knocking anyone who does this, okay? We have different goals for our podcast, but imagine if I go, today's episode, we're talking about Robert the Doll. We're going to spend the whole episode talking about Robert the Doll, and you're like, what the hell? Robert the Doll. Oh, he's the doll from Annabelle. Was it actually? Don't even know. Robert the Doll is a famous haunted doll. It's in a glass case somewhere. And I just rehashed all the stuff you've already heard or Wikipedia article on it. You'd be like, what? And then the next episode, today, get ready to take a trip to the Bermuda Triangle. You'd be like, what? That's weird. What? It's just like Jason's just covering the most basic paranormal stuff. But here's the thing. There is a need for that. There's 100% a need for that. That's why I'm not knocking people who do that. Because I always see that this podcast is, you already have an interest in the paranormal. You have a base knowledge of the paranormal. You know about Bermuda Triangle. I mean, you don't know what it is. Like, you don't know what's causing it. You don't know how these events occur. But I assume when you listen to this podcast, you're already familiar with stuff, like general stuff like Bigfoot, haunted dolls, Bermuda Triangle, Loch Ness Monster. So I don't want to spend an episode talking about those things. I want to talk about the weirdest stuff. And I'll reference it in episodes a lot of times. I'll say, you guys, if you're listening to this podcast, this is like a intermediate paranormal show. This isn't, but it's funny because a lot of people, they go, I don't like paranormal stuff at all. And I like your show, but I think part of that is because you're like, I've never heard any of this stuff before, but it does make it harder for people to discover. So Cat Cans, Jason, are you and Sabine going to get married? Feel free to skip the question. Just curious. It's funny because again, I've talked about this before on the podcast. It was from the nerd uprising of the internet when all of a sudden I was reading articles from nerds about stuff that I was into, right? I'm like, wow, an entire website dedicated to Transformers, sign me up. This was in the mid 2000s. I was like, oh, dude, this is totally dope. Cracked.com, dude, I was on that website all the time. And it drove me nuts. And I'm reading these nerd websites, and all they would ever do is be like, so me and my girlfriend went to go see the new Spider-Man, and my girlfriend loved it. Well, then my girlfriend went to go get popcorn, and I started talking to someone else. But my girlfriend, we get it, dude. You have a girlfriend. We get it. You're a nerd, and you have a girlfriend. This is not shocking to any of us. It drove me up the wall, and they all did it. The second any of these guys, and listen, I'm a nerd. I'm not keep saying that they're nerds. I was on the websites, right? I'm like, oh, okay, what's Cracked going to talk about this? It drove me nuts. And so from that day forth, I swore, because I saw it so many times, they're like, we get it, dude. You finally got a girl that I don't talk about my personal relationships. I will not. I could be married to the same woman for the last 5 years. I never tell nobody. I never tell nobody, not because I'm trying to keep it private, but because I think it's super irritating. They drove me nuts. You have no idea. It's like, because again, it wasn't like I was jealous. I was like, oh, I have a girlfriend and I love Spider-Man too, and I went alone. It was the fact that I knew why they were saying it. They were flexing. I was like, I don't care if you have a girlfriend. How good was Spider-Man? Spider-Man pick up a car and throw it at Green Goblin? That's what I really want to know. So that's the answer to that question. Jason, have you heard of Martin Cabello III? He's in a next level about. I have not, but I can definitely check that out. Let's see. DRR fanfic. Okay, El Pato says, I imagine him impregnating some alien lady by touching her hand and then waking up with her offspring next to his bed, and having to raise it. That would be actually kind of dope. Actually, it would depend on like how old the alien baby was. If it was like a infant, I'd be kind of bored, right? I'd be like, oh man, it's just laying there hatching out of an egg would be kind of cool. But if it was already like an adult and it was my kid and I could like make him do stuff, then that would be that would be totally awesome. I was like, oh, I thought you guys matured at an accelerated rate. I'm just holding this little baby person. Because if it was like a dude, I'd be like, let's sneak on one of your ships, man. He's like, no, Dad, they'll vaporize you. I was like, oh, come on, son. You don't love your old man? Let's go. Let's go. Um, yeah, Synapse user were talking about. Yeah, I was stuck. My YouTube subs are stuck at for a long time, but because of those, that's what Dirty Dan's saying about those shorts. Yeah, they really just like I watch a lot of shorts on YouTube too. Like sometimes I will just go to OSAS. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, sometimes you just flip through there. Fehu from Argentina, thanks for swinging on by. I know like some of these comments are much older. I'm sorry it's taken me for so long. El Pato said Spider Verse sucked. I actually really liked Spider Verse. The first one I kind of caught it off guard. I watched like a really like a cam rip of the first Spider Man. I was like, I'm not interested in Spider Man cartoon or nothing. Really liked it. Barvey Man 362, thanks for rolling in. Long time supporter, long time listener of the show. I really liked Across the Spider Verse. I get that's not the humor. I think can really drive you insane. It's almost like a Cthulhu level, unknowable insanity. The humor can get nuts, but the animation wise, I loved it. Cat Cans. If I ever listened to Helium, if that's maybe now that I see that it's related to Letters to Cleo, probably. I have all their stuff. It's been a long time. Barvey Man, do you have any gross episodes planned? I feel like it's been a while. I was thinking the other day about that episode about the guy rubbing his herp juice. The guy was like, "Oh yeah, sorry to the people in Puerto Rico." Apparently, I don't know if I'm still on the big screen. They're all like, "All right, this is going to be so good." They're going to eat a big piece of chicken. There was this guy who had open herpes wounds, and they're like the bartender's like, "No, no, I don't even know why I let him watch. I don't know why I let you guys watch it this long." The guy he had like open sores, and he was rubbing it on baby best. The Target, he would go. That was one of the grossest episodes. It was like episode 40. I think it was in the first 100. Those first 100 episodes were nuts. Here, the thing is, I say that I do. We've covered some like diarrhea and bucket stories, but here's the thing: it's like you have to take them as they come. Like I I can't look for them and I can't force them. That I think that's where you start to fall into like, oh, let's see if I can find an even grosser story this time. While I find them so funny, I find them infinitely funny and disgusting. I find them like if I find one, I'll cover it, and if I don't, that's kind of what it comes down to. That's kind of what it comes down to as far as those gross stories. Like the whole that was the bug chasing episode. It was so disgusting. I think the last one we covered was the last one that I thought was gross was the guy who worked at Arby's and he was like peeing in the milkshake. He's peeing in the milkshake machine or something. I don't remember, but I thought that one was pretty gross. But I think Barbie Man is more thinking along the lines of the herb juice or the well, Cat Can said the one Colt episode, which I got a lot of complaints about. And that was one of the episodes I've only maybe on 4 or 5 episodes on the whole podcast do I say this episode contains strong imagery. Listener discretion is advised. I only said that a few times. Because if I said it all the time, then you would just become part of the noise and you wouldn't even think about it. So I keep it for episodes that are truly, truly disturbing. Because if it was every episode, you'd be like, oh, whatever. That episode I had to add a second warning. Like the first, it says that, and then I go, hey guys, I got complaints about this, so I'm telling you right now, this episode is so disturbing because people said I heard you say the intro and I didn't even think anything of it. And yeah, that was the one, White Power Nebraska, I think is the name of that episode. Jason, have you ever watched Hannah Reloaded? I have not. It's funny because I don't have a lot of time. I spend so much time on the show that I don't get enough. Like every so like last night I watched Attack of the Adult Babies, and that'll be part of my zeitgeist for the next year. We'll talk about it on Dead Rabbit. Dead Rabbit Radio Recommends is insane. And then I do the movie nights, the Patreon movie nights. But other than that, I kind of just in my free time when I'm not working on the podcast, I try to not do podcast related stuff. Like I will just watch Danny Gonzalez videos or whatever I've been watching. Project People Play Project Zomboid on YouTube. I watch a lot of that stuff. So I usually, and when I am in the zone when I'm researching, it's mostly just reading articles. It's actually a lot harder to watch a video and take notes. Like I don't do that very often. I've had to. Sometimes I'll just download the transcript off of YouTube and just go through it that way because I can read faster than I can listen. Stinkbug Potato, thanks for swinging on by. Have you been to Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Louisville, Kentucky? I've never been to Kentucky. I've only left the state of Oregon twice. Nah, maybe not. Maybe 5 times since I moved up here 11 years ago. Maybe more than that, but each time was to California, and I went to Washington once. I don't get out. See, if this show was, if I full time, it'd be dope, dude. I would 100%. I'd like break into that sanatorium. I'm all giving myself schizophrenia. I was like, I want to experience what it was like to be here, taking all these drugs. Melissa Wagner says, last podcast on the left would love you. That'd be awesome. That would be totally awesome. I remember thinking like, back in the day, because they've been around for a long time. I remember when I first heard, this is my first exposure to Last Podcast on the Left. I remember I was reading an article on Kotaku or Gizmodo, or way back in the day, right? The nerd websites I used to go to all the time. And someone was talking about Last Podcast on the Left, and I remember I go, that name's so good. I go, damn it. The name's so good. Every so often you'll hear, because I was familiar with the movie Last House on the Left. There's not a lot of people. I've heard people think that Last Podcast on the Left is in relation to their political views because they're like they're saying like we're the last podcast on the left side. Like, no, that's a horror movie. Last House on the Left. I was like, Last Podcast on the Left. Like, what a great title. There's a musician called Alice in Wonderland. And I go, oh, such a good name. Not like I could ever use it. Not like I could ever be Alice in Wonderland. Allison Wonderland. I'm like that. Sometimes you just got to step back and go, come on, man. Like that's a perfect name. Last Podcast on the Left. And Alice in Wonderland. Depressy Jesse, thanks for swinging on by. I've heard of Skinwalker before, and it was my best friend's voice. Absolutely terrifying. I just bolted to my car. It's funny because Skinwalkers is one of those stories, like we said, really came out of the culture of the export. It's really caught on. I wonder if the phenomenon existed before the stories, or if some paranormal phenomenon is imitating those stories because they're so popular. Not necessarily because it's a tulpa. But I haven't done a ton of research on like mimics pre-2000s. Like obviously we have stories of doppelgangers like going way back, but the idea of this creature in the wilderness that's mimic, and you could see. When I heard the term skinwalkers growing up, it was always about a very specific Native American legend that was nothing like the stories of these things. I'm not saying these things don't exist. I think there is something to the mimic, but is it truly a unique cryptid, or is it something that's imitating this cryptid because it knows people fear it? It'd be an interesting question. You see, that's something. So here's the thing, like on the podcast, I like covering stuff people haven't covered. That is an interesting, this another thing, Kenny, talk about an interesting way. That's an interesting take on the Skinwalker mimic thing. Is it truly what, I'm actually going to write it down, honestly. Is the Skinwalker original? Or is it a demon or demonic force that's taking something, the same way something may take the form of a clown or a childhood fear to evoke fear? Cecil Quetzalcoatl, favorite conspiracy theory. That is again like asking what my favorite cryptid is. There's obviously, because there's so many. There's obviously ones that I'm writing down. Andre S. wrote down something about Andre Daigle. I'll look that up. Monkeys don't exist is a great, fantastic, might be a new wrinkle in that story. I've kind of been hinting about some stuff this episode. Try not to get sued, but who knows? You could. Monkeys Don't Exist, obviously, is a super funny one. It's one that's on the back of my business card. On my business card, Dead Rabbit Radio. This is one's a little dirty, I think. It's so funny though. Never skimp on your business cards. That's definitely a lesson you can take from Patrick Bateman. This one's dirty, but when I handed it to whenever I hand it to somebody, the first thing you do is go, "This is a nice card. It's thick, it's glossy, it's generally not dusty. Have whatever that is, the Dorito stain. It's pretty gross." Dead Rabbit Radio. This is the back of the card. A lot of stuff. It only has my email address again because I'm paranoid, but it says personal investigations include stuff that I've experienced: shadow men, Bodox. Which I don't know if I've talked about Bodox on the show. Demonic possession, Wasco Street. That's the spooky street I used to live on. The Blue Boy and the Witch War. And then it says ongoing investigations include Mormon Bigfoot. So here's the people go, what? Ongoing investigations include Mormon Bigfoot, Monkeys Don't Exist, The Conformers. This is probably the most, that's actually the answer to the question. The Conformers. If you ask me what my favorite conspiracy theory is, it's The Conformers. Mountains Are Trees, The Black Bedrooms, and Barbara Bolick, which is one of the weirdest missing person stories that I've ever come across in years and years of researching. The Conformers is the idea that there's only one alien race. It's a race of silica based, basically just a pile of rocks. When they talk, it sounds like pebbles are falling into a tin pail. Super vicious, kill humans, no reason. They're either called the Conformers or the Controllers. They've been referred to as two different entities. It is the only alien. Every alien story that doesn't involve the Conformers is either a psyop, confusion among the witness, or purposely, like the aliens are disguising, the Conformers are disguising their intent through some sort of means. Super interesting conspiracy theory. Is it true? We don't know. A lot of times when people talk about the Conformers, websites just disappear. Now, we've talked about it multiple times on the show, so I don't know why some websites get shut down and this one podcast is allowed to stay up. It could be that there's nothing to it. It could be that it was an ARG. It's a fascinating story. There's more behind the scenes stuff with the Conformers I've never really been able to share. It's one of those things that you just come across stuff from time to time, and it's not information that you don't have the ability to speak about it. But super interesting. The Black Bedrooms too, that's an interesting one because that's one that I feel that this show put together from multiple experiences. People waking up in the middle of the night in their room being pitch black. Jason, that's the lamest one. Everyone's no, it's more than that. They wake up and there's just like a black void and they can walk around for 5-10 minutes, never find their wall. And it was a bunch of individual people telling these stories over a series of months, and none of them knew each other. I love finding stuff like that, putting those together. Let's see. Madcap Bedlam says, my favorite has to be Spring-Heeled Jack. I don't know if we ever did an episode on Spring-Heeled Jack. It's interesting because that is a story that we think we know the origin. I don't want to ruin your... I mean, I guess it's just a theory, but he was a sex offender. He was a pervert. He was a real guy who was, I think, poking women in the butts or sexually assaulting women and getting away. And he did it so many times that the legend of Spring-Heeled Jack kind of came up. If I remember correctly, they think that it was a real sex offender who was running around London, and he got away so many times that they just thought he was supernatural. Let's see here. Yeah, mac and cheese growing up, the Jersey Devil and Skinwalker. So you do have those. The Jersey Devil is one that I've never really covered. I think it's like the orphan, right? Who's a mutant and ran into the forest, or supposedly the real devil. I think that's something that if you lived out there, it would definitely be creepy, or if you lived in the wood area. Jersey Devil never really spooked me out. The Lost Tapes, though, the mac and cheese says, I just asked because I grew up with the Lost Tapes. The Lost Tapes, I mentioned it on the podcast. That's a dope show. I think you can find it on YouTube. It's like a series of found footage. It was like 6 episodes or 10 episodes. It's found footage where they run into cryptids. The Mongolian Death Worm, I think, was the one I saw, and I really liked it. It's a really cool show. Leon Rosebell, thank you for joining. Hey, I listen to your podcast every day, and I love it. Thanks for all. Greetings from Mexico. Awesome. Thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying the show. Search and Rescue Tales from Reddit about 8 years ago. Was that the one with the staircase, or was that the one with the hand and the tree? That's what Barky Man was talking about. Do you have any, Depressy Jesse asked, do you have any movie recommendations related to conspiracies, paranormal things? I'll say this. Under the Silver Lake is awesome. Under the Silver Lake, from that very first shot to the very end, it's nothing but conspiracy theories. It's a Hollywood movie. It bombed at the box office. It's made by the guy who did It Follows, which I was not a fan of. It Follows. I fell asleep. We fall asleep during a horror movie. I mean, come on. I didn't know he directed it. I probably wouldn't have watched it, honestly. Under the Silver Lake is one of the best conspiracy movies because I didn't know anything about it going in. Nothing. I didn't know it had anything to do with conspiracy theories. But it's so cool. It is such a good, it's like a modern noir mystery, but the mystery is a huge conspiracy. And that might be spoiling it a bit, but you did ask about conspiracy things. I would recommend Under the Silver Lake, and I would recommend The Conspiracy. The movie's called The Conspiracy. It's a found footage film, if you're into those things. It's fantastic. It might be called the Mithras, Mithras conspiracy. But I think it's just called The Conspiracy. The title sometimes is blacked out. It's like it's censored, the Mithras part. If you're into found footage and you're into conspiracy movies, it's one of my favorites. Absolutely. I don't often watch movies twice. I've watched that movie at least twice. Really, really enjoy it. Under the Silver Lake, I've only seen once, but I still really enjoy that. And if you're looking for a very interesting conspiracy theory documentary, Tickled, which is about competitive tickling. You're like, what? That's nothing to do with dude. Tickled is insane. Trust me. It takes a bit of a hard stomach to watch. If you know, dudes getting tickled ain't my thing. It's 2 hours long. Tickled. Here's a funny thing. I remember I was working on a play. I was in a play, and my buddy David came up to me one day. He goes, "Have you seen Tickled?" And I was like, "What?" He goes, "Just watch it." He goes, "Don't watch trailers. Don't find anything out about it, but you're gonna love it. You're gonna love it." 2 hours of guys getting tickled. I was like, okay. So I went home and watched Tickled. The next day we were at play practice. I was like, bro, dude, what in the world was that? He goes, "I knew you would love it." He goes, "It was insane, wasn't it?" I go, "I had no idea what was going to happen in that movie." And then this other dude walks up, and we're like, "Hey, what's up?" And he goes, "What are you guys talking about?" And we go, "Just go home. We're not going to tell you. Just go watch Tickled." He's like, "What?" "Just go watch Tickled." Next day he comes back. Maybe it was like a day or two later. He came back to rehearsal, and he's like, "What in the world was that?" Tickled. Fantastic. So hopefully those are good recommendations for you. The Conspiracy, Tickled, which is a documentary, conspiracies, found footage, and Under the Silver Lake is just a work of art. Oh, if I had looked down two sentences, Barfy Man says, "Have you watched The Conspiracy?" Yeah, it's a fantastic movie. Mac and Cheese recommended Lake Mungo. I appreciated it, I guess, for what it was. It was super built up for me. I think it was part of it. I think it was really hot up for hyped up. Enzo Incitatus, thanks for coming in. Yes, you joined us live. To be fair, alcohol and ghost sounds like an awesome night. So here's the thing, that's true. It can be. My thing is a safety thing, first and foremost. And then, because like I said, I've gone ghost hunting with people, and we've had experiences. We've seen things. We felt things. We both got tickled, and then Years later, I'd be like, "Hey, man, remember this happened?" And he's like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "Dude, there was like a bunch of people there. Remember?" He's like, "I remember going there, but I don't remember nothing happening." So people's brains automatically have some safety gauges on them to make it so you stop really like remembering stuff that doesn't fit the normal world. If you had alcohol in the mix, then definitely you could be like, "Yeah, I remember when I remember when that witch came flying around trying to get us to eat cheesecake." But we were both drunk, dude. We both had a couple of beers, so quit calling my wife a witch. You're like, no, that's clearly the witch. She's still feeding us cheesecake. Let's see here. Dirk Grobaman. Thanks for swinging on by. He's been listening to the podcast for a long time. Keep seeing him pop up. So this is an interesting question. Two Face Production says, "Have you thought about doing a creepypasta episode? Just stories that are for sure fictional but still worth telling." That's a super interesting question, and probably not. And the reason why is I kind of did that before, and people were like, "This sucks. This sucks." When you're putting out content, you do want to try different things, right? The podcast itself is the podcast. For a while there, I was putting out these short episodes called, what was it called, like True Spooky Tales or listener mail, and it was supposed to be. It was super confusing. It was too confusing. It was supposed to be letters that people wrote to me, but were fake. And I was reading them. So you're listening to the podcast, and then you hear my voice reading a fake letter that's a creepy. I thought the stories were good. I thought they were spooky stuff. But all of a sudden, you hear the guy that's telling you real stories, telling you a fake story. But I thought everyone knew they were fake. You're like, wow, this guy's getting some crazy mail right now. Did not a lot of people listen to him. The people who did listen to him were super confused. So I'm not saying that it's all. I mean, like, I have come across stories that were really good, and then like before I told, like I have all the notes ready to go, and I was like, I think this is fake. Like the story I did about the girl who had like there was the mother who had the head in the box in the backyard. That was a story that even up to the time I was recording it, I go, is this real? Like, is this a real story? It's really hard to say. Like, it could be fake. It could be a really well written fictional story, but it's so hard to tell. And I had to make a decision to go, it could be old world folk magic. Like, this 100% could be real. It could be fake. I don't know, and that's how it goes with a lot of this stuff. There's another one I was going to do about these trees that had faces on them, and this guy was like carving faces in the trees to keep the demons away. And I had all my notes ready to go on that, and I go, I can't do two of these. I can't do two of them. I can't do two stories that I'm not, because usually I'm 90% this story happened in some way or fashion. The person may be misinterpreting the events. The person may be having a psychotic breakdown. It may be a true paranormal event, but the person isn't making the story up. The narrator, the person who wrote this, isn't trying to fool anyone. They think this actually happened. I'd say I'm usually 90% that that's the case. Sometimes though, like the tree with the head in the box story, I was like, this could go either way. This was a little bit lower on the threshold. I was like, this might be 50-50. Like, this could be fake, this could be real. So you have to make those determinations. The tree one, I think I go, this could be 50-50 too, but I go, this is a path you don't want to go down. It's funny to say that. The other day I had a hard time coming up with an episode title. And Sabine goes, why don't you use Chat GPT? And I go, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I have goofed around on Chat GPT. We've done a couple episodes on it, but I was like, I'm not going to start using this AI to generate my headlines. It's a bad road, because that's just part of the creative process, even having to sit down. I'm not saying that all the titles are great. Yesterday's episode was just called The Shadows, but I go, I didn't want to take that step where it would probably generate amazing titles, but then I'm taking a little bit of my creative process and getting rid of it. The tree story, I found both of those stories on X. And I go, well, we're not going to do that one. We did the head in the box one. I was 50-50 on that one. Let's not do two 50-50 stories, in the same year. So that's really what it comes down to. And I think so. I think sometimes the best creepy pasta, you can have someone like Darren Marlar, who's he does Weird Darkness. It's a daily paranormal podcast where he reads out. He doesn't do creepy pasta. Actually, I shouldn't say that. He does true stuff too. But he's a narrator. He does audiobook voice. He does voiceovers for audiobooks and stuff like that. Sometimes you want a storyteller to tell those stories, and I think sometimes the best creepy pastas have to be enjoyed in that medium, right? In the green text, where it's just like da 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 da. I got to the point where sometimes it's hard for me to read not green text. I had to train my brain to get out of that reading that. Um, so yeah, hopefully that kind of answers that question. Mac and cheese. Ever thought of covering the lesser known Ed and Lorraine Warren cases? I talked about the one where Ed and Lorraine Warren hunted Bigfoot. It's hilarious. I love that episode. That's going to be a bonus episode, a behind the scenes episode this summer. I have their book Ghost Hunters. It's in my room. I just need to read it. They have the one where they're fighting demons in a porno theater. I was like, oh, this is gold. I just have to read it. By the time I go to bed, I usually go to bed about 11 o'clock at night. I'm just trying to shut my brain off. And instead, I grab my phone and play stupid video games on my phone. Seed Ship. That's a Dead Rabbit Radio recommends. Seed Ship on the phone. It's a text adventure where you're a spaceship with 1,000 humans on it, and you're just flying through space, and you have to make decisions based on moving away from meteorites. It's all text based. There's no graphics, but and then you have to keep sending probes down to planets to find a proper one for humans. I love that game. Anyways, Barfy Man says I've done Warren episodes, but yeah, as far as like the lesser known cases, they've done some weird ones. Yeah, they have done some weird cases like the porno theater, and they went to West Point. I did read the first chapter of the book. They get rid of a ghost at West Point, the military academy, stuff like that. Let's see here. Enzo Invictus says best alien footage I ever saw came out of Israel. Dude zoomed in on a UFO in the sky and you could see it. The worst part about UFO footage, though, is that it's almost always impossible to find again unless it's a very famous case that got its own name. That's an interesting one. H.P. Lovecraft Cat congratulated me on 5 years. Thank you. Meow. Thank you. That's a super interesting question. And before I go on that of eruption, yeah, sometimes good UFO footage is hard to find. That's part of that archiving thing. You kind of got to download it because what are the search terms? I think the most interesting anomaly that I'd seen come out of Israel, it was an old one. You could probably find it. I think it's kind of been debunked, but it was that blue humanoid that was flying over the city of like Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, somewhere over there, and then it shot off into the sky. And you're like, Jason, that was totally debunked. That was totally debunked. What was interesting about it is there was two different angles, two different groups of people videotaped it. And the way that it just shot, it was one of those things like it shot up and the camera movement, it seemed unexpected. It seemed like like it wasn't staged. Now listen, here's the interesting thing about paranormal phenomenon and debunking is that you can have an article where say this blue humanoid is flying over Israel. Obviously, our BS meters, even if we believe in the paranormal, our BS meters are going to be activated. And it's almost like we look for the debunking article. We look for what it could possibly be because we don't want to sound like dummies, right? We don't want to believe every single thing we see. And I remember at the time, I think someone was debunking it, but I couldn't say for sure. Like, because sometimes it'll be like that was debunked. That you could tell by the pixels in this or whatever. And I mean, you maybe, but it could have been real. I don't know. There are some things like the woman at the UN, the monster woman with a little crown on her head. When I saw that photo, I was like, what in the world is that? Is there a monster at the UN? And I went and I tracked down, it didn't take very long, the video footage from that UN council. And it was a woman who had a face mask because it was kind of during COVID. So it made it look like she had a giant gaping maw and she had like her hair done up in a certain way. And you can watch the live video footage and see that it's a human woman. The photo makes her look like a space alien with a giant mouth, gaping maw. That was easy to kind of go, okay, that's. But then, as far as like the little blue guy flying around Israel, it was so weird, and then I'm sure it did get debunked in some fashion. But you kind of gotta, I don't know, you kind of gotta keep your mind open. But they say not so much that your brain falls out, but you also can't. Every time someone debunks something, you have to go, what do I believe the debunker? Like we will, our BS meters will go off and go, well, we don't believe this. Let's believe the debunker. You know what I mean? Or I'm just rambling. It has been almost 3 hours of this 5 year live stream, but I again, I think I really like that one. That that encounter at least. Let's see here. Barvey Man says maybe the golems are killing the ghosts. I don't know if that was in jest when I said there were no haunted places in Israel, but who knows? Let's see here. I skipped down a bit here. Joe Logan said Tickled is so damned good, and Gabriel M agreed. Tickled is fantastic. Yeah, it's such a good story. Let's see here. James Jones, thank you for swinging on by. Happy birthday. Definitely. Thank you for enjoying it. Austin Sweeney. Hey, Jason, I've never been able to buy merch or donate because the finances. Hey, that's totally fine. But I've been here since episode 45, and I say I love your show and I thank you for the podcast. No problem. I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that you love the show. And I really hope that you don't feel pressured into donating money because there are other podcasts that do that. And it's super lame. Super lame. But yeah, no, I think that's totally awesome. Have a good one, Barfy Man. He left like 10 minutes ago. This is Moon through here. Saigo. Saigo's in the chat. Let's take a look here. Joe Logan, thank you. Your titles are absolutely strength of the show. It's really easy to recommend something called The Ennoble Man is at the kitchen table and have someone remember it. That's interesting. Yeah, sometimes those titles do kind of stick out. Daddy Boyles asks, who's going to make the Dead Rabbit Iceberg and Psycho Goes Haunted Closet episode is haunted. It's so funny. Veronica, you're talking about Veronica the Haunted Doll, Derek Roman. She's right here. Veronica, my friend, she's down in California. She moved away. She came up the other week, though. That's why I was hanging out. Had I not been raised on screamers and creepypasta, I would. Yeah, I guess there's a party going on outside. Never discovered this show. Yeah, I think we all kind of had like a background in growing up in horror stuff or paranormal stuff. Daddy Bobbles, going back to that, that would be awesome. I've thought about even hiring someone on Fiverr to make a Dead Rabbit Radio iceberg if I compiled all the topics. But I was like, then that's just kind of lame. Like, I can't do it myself. Look at all this mystery stuff that I've solved. So I never did it. Yeah, mac and cheese, as much as I love the well-known paranormal cases, yeah, you got to get started with stuff like Amityville. No, that the obscurity of your podcast makes it all the more fun. Yeah, it's fun for me, too. Like, I'm finding this stuff out sometimes the day before I'm telling you guys about it. And sometimes when I'm reading an article, I'm like, dude, I can't wait to share this with you guys. This is nuts. Let's see here. James Jones, happy birthday. We're moving back down. I'm writing down this book recommendation on Synapse users. I'll take a look at it. Vince G has been 5 years already. I discovered you from the 3-6 Mafia and Memphis Rap episode long ago. Vince G's been around a long time. That was an old episode. What would we call that? Was it Memphis Rap Sigils? Was that what it was called on the Conspiracy Theory Iceberg? That was one, I remember when I was recording, I was like, dude, this one's going to get me killed. Every so often, because I was like connecting these rappers and these street gangs to the West Memphis 3, the murder of those 3 boys. And I was like, this is one of those stories that if it's real, I'm going to die. Like, sometimes you come across a conspiracy. When you talk about paranormal stuff, when you talk about alien stuff, you don't really worry about it. That's not true. Sometimes I've covered stories that I think might be cursed, and I've talked about those. I usually have a warning on the title itself, so you don't even listen to the episode. But sometimes conspiracy episodes, I go, this could get me killed. Again, not the popular conspiracy theories, but when you're covering stuff like that these murderers basically murdered these people who's to say? And especially like even now, like if someone took me out, they'd be like, "Oh, remember that guy who had I don't know 50,000 subs and he had like 1,100 episodes and then he just stopped putting so." Actually, I should give myself a little more credit. I think if I disappeared now, people would wonder. I think the show's big enough. It'd be like, "Wow, that was weird. How do you put out 1,100 episodes and then just disappear?" And then I got shot or something like that. But in the first couple hundred episodes, the Spare Code, Short Circuit, the Spare Code is one of my favorites. The episode with the dude and the Iron Butterfly that went nuts was wild. I really liked that episode too. That was a cool one. And again, that was a story that I just found. I don't remember. I don't want to say that because maybe someone recommended it to me. It was Butterfly, Iron Butterfly, and the Drake, the equation or something like that. And that's a good one for a Dead Rabbit Radio rerun or maybe even a classics. Again, just finding this stuff and sharing it with you guys is dope. And again, if someone recommended that to me, it's all the better because that just makes it all feel so much more collaborative. Dave, hey, I thought I missed this. No, we've been doing it now 2.5 hours. This might be the longest. This might be the longest one. Yeah, mac and cheese. They left, but yeah, that fan art you can always send it on over. Of eruption, we had talked about this earlier. Do you think the submarine is a distraction? No, I don't. I think it was just a super weird news story. You had these billionaires trapped underwater, and one or two of them were billionaires, and some people say they weren't even billionaires. But that's not the point. I said I compared it to when those kids were trapped in that mine or that cave, and it was flooded in, and all the people were swimming looking for them. We didn't know if we were going to find the kids, if they were drowned, if they, whatever. And it's a story, it's not just a bizarre story, but it's a story of hope. Same thing with like the Chilean miners who got trapped in the coal mine, whereas like for days they're trying to get them out of there. I think that's what it was. It was a weird story that involved possibly them surviving. That's what kept it going. If we knew that it imploded on the first day, which is now looking like it was pretty likely, it would have been in the newspaper for a day. I think for whatever reason, those stories, whether it's little Timmy fell in the well. I remember was it little Jessica when I was a kid? She fell in a well and like America was transfixed. How are they going to get her out of the well? And then they did a Simpsons episode about it. Gabriel M talking about It Follows. I've been telling her we need to watch Under the Silver Lake. Under the Silver Lake is so good. I don't know if I've done a Dead Rabbit Radio recommends on it, but it's so good. And again, I didn't like It Follows. Just like I didn't like Hereditary that much, but the strange thing about the Johnsons, Ari Aster's first film, is absolutely nuts. So sometimes I'll watch a movie and I'll be like, I don't like this. I don't like this at all. But then if another movie I watch that director just completely impresses me, like Under Silver Lake, it really I just don't know what to think of these guys. Like It Follows wasn't terrible. I was just bored. And Under Silver Lake, I couldn't look away. I was like, oh my God. And again, I had no idea what it was about. I think that's the best way to go into it. Kathleen Evans, oh my gosh, I caught an actual live stream. Yes. Hopefully you're still here. Like I said, I'm way behind on these comments, but it's really cool to see you guys in here. Let's see here. This Dirty Dan. Jason, I have to choose the next movie for a family movie night. I can't think of one. And no, I'm not having them watch Tickled. If you tell you what, I don't know what the age group is for your family, but if you want you know what? I watched this. Your mileage may vary on this one. I watched this movie recently called Brian and Charles. It's a Welsh film, I think, about this guy who's an inventor and he invents really crummy things like a belt to hold potatoes in. And it's a documentary. It's a fake documentary, a mockumentary, but they dropped that concept real early on. This crew comes out to interview this inventor, and he's like, "Hey, I built this potato belt, and I built this purse, this acorn purse. It's just a purse with acorns on it." And they're documenting this guy's really weird, eccentric life. And then he goes, "Hey, I have an idea." And then they show him in his garage, and he builds a fully functional, sentient robot that comes out of the garage and is like, "Hello, my name is Charles." And it's this giant washer machine. It's this giant robot washing machine with arms and a mannequin head. And it's a fun family film. It's fun. I don't know if you have like little kids. It's not like it's completely appropriate for all ages. It's a super fun movie. I don't necessarily say it's like a laugh out loud comedy, but I think about that movie all the time. It's a fun family film. Brian and Charles, and this robot just walks around. He just wants to be a robot. He just wants to be a thing, and it's I love it. I love that movie. My tummy is a washing machine. It's fantastic. I really recommend. I think that it was based on a short film, and I think the short film was up for an Academy Award. But yeah, that would be my recommend. Fosteller. Yeah, I'm glad you were able to make the live stream. Awesome, awesome. Really love it. Simon Ritter, the map website for submitting personal paranormal experiences. I don't know if that map is still up. I think that what you might be referencing. Sammy Morris, hey Jason, have a great weekend. Thank you. You have a great weekend too. Ren asks, Ren recently joined the Patreon. Thank you for that. A random question: what are your thoughts on the book movie A Clockwork Orange? Love your podcast. I've never read the book. I started to and realized it was in a completely different language. It was all written in slang of the Droogs. You know, it's so funny. The movie A Clockwork Orange, I came to it super late in life. And Snail Eyes, yes, thank you. I'm glad you're able to come as well. And Beef and Sir Vlad Harakon. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, I guess I did talk about that on the live stream. You're right. You're right. Yeah, and Snail Eyes is right. They said, I'm glad I caught the tail end, and that we will be ending this probably in the next 15 minutes. But I love the movie Clockwork Orange. I didn't see it until really late in life. I was probably in my mid 20s. It came out in the 1970s. The James Jones. That's an interesting question. I really enjoyed it. It definitely, like, I understand. Like, some people just hate that movie. Some people absolutely find it horrific, which is kind of the point, right? I guess the movie ends. It's kind of a happy ending for Alex. Was that his name? I really enjoyed it. I think that Stanley Kubrick obviously is an artist, and I think the storyline is insane. It's a movie. It's one of those movies that I hope. I very rarely say this because I love reboots. I love reboots, but I hope they never reboot Clockwork Orange. One, I don't think you could, and two, I think you needed to have that eye for directing with that plot. You had to make it look beautiful. You had to make it look beautiful, so the ugliness stood out even more. If you shot it dark and grimy, it would feel more sensational. It was a group of lunatics in a very civilized society, and you had to show that contrast of that. But I enjoyed it, overall. But again, I saw it really late in life. My buddy Steve, he loved that. He had a shirt in high school that said "Droogs don't run," and I was like, "Dude, what is that?" And he's like, "It's from A Clockwork Orange." And I don't watch. I was like, "I don't watch movies that came out before I was born." He goes, "Then it was not that old. Watch it." And I was like, "Whatever, bro." We got in a huge fight. He's hitting me with a cane. He pushed me into the river. Well, anyways, I fast forward a couple years, and I ended up watching. I was actually, I think I was over at a buddy's house. We were ripping stoned, and we put in A Clockwork Orange. I don't know who had it. I don't know what maniac thought it would be a good time. Actually, now thinking about it, was maybe me. Maybe I had seen it over at another dude's house stoned. But anyways, we watched it, and I remember, like, my friend Jackie, she's like, "What in the world?" She actually didn't say that. She watched the whole movie. She was totally gobsmacked, and I remember I went to bed, and I woke up the next morning, and she was sitting on the couch, and she was watching it again in the morning. It's like, "Jackie, this movie, I don't know if you should be watching this movie alone. This is pretty intense." And she's like, "I already saw it." Anyways, great movie. Nicholas Crow, dude, keep up the good work. Been listening since the episode on Paleolithic Deep State. That was an old one. Just wanted to drop in and say thanks for the countless hours for free entertainment and laughs. You're dope, bro. Thank you. Really appreciate that. And let me go back here, too, because I kind of glossed over these guys. Beef, thanks for jumping into the live stream. And Sir Vlad Harkonnen. I feel like I just kind of glossed over you guys. Hell, he says, "Hello, Jason. I remember when you bought the owl painting. I was in the live stream." Yeah, we don't do a lot of live streams, so I'm always these are always fun to do. James Jones, this is an interesting question. It seems like you've started doing the special entrance bit for Carboner-copter pilots. What changed your mind on that? So this is deep Dead Rabbit Radio lore. This would go in the Dead Rabbit Radio iceberg. There was a time where, and I think this is what you're referencing, I don't remember what season it was, probably like season 7, maybe season 10 or whatever, where everyone, oh my God, everyone who walked into the podcast, who supported the show or whatever, would be like, and walking on in on all fours while juggling goats. We don't know how he does it, but everyone give it up for James Jones. Woohoo, yeah, yeah, juggle those goats, juggle those goats. And nowadays, I just go, hey, walking in Dead Rabbit Command. Everyone give it up for James Jones. Yay! And what happened was I was doing that, and it was funny, right? The first couple times. And then I couldn't think of things anymore. I couldn't think of any things anymore. And it was the season I was getting the most Patreons. And I go, okay, if I was just a person listening to a podcast and I hear people walking in wacky ways, and I go, oh, if I support the Patreon, I wonder what Jason's going to say about me. I'm going to give money, and maybe I'll be juggling goats. Maybe I'll be stuffing chinchillas down my shirt. I don't know. And nobody ever thought that. Nobody ever thought that. But I go, I better keep these goofy things up, because if someone joined the Patreon because they wanted a goofy entrance, and they don't get it, I go, I have to keep doing these goofy entrances until there's no new Patreon supporters. I go, the second I go a day without a new Patreon supporter, I'm going to drop this gimmick. Because what happened was I ran out of stuff. I had eventually had a list in my, because I would be sitting there just dripping sweat trying to think of something funny. I would spend 10 minutes coming up with just that. And I'd just be I'm so hot. I should have had it. I was hot. I wasn't dripping sweat because I was stressed. I'm dripping sweat and I'm so hot. And I go, oh my God. So I made a list of like alphabetical animals. So at the end of that season, I'm like coming in on a bear. The next episode, climbing on top of a chinchilla. And then the one after that, riding in on a dog. I was just like, I give up. And then I stopped getting a new Patreon. I immediately abandoned the gimmick. I was done. Now, there should be somebody say that was the season where I got the most Patreons, right? Like one after another. So maybe there's something to it. But it was just driving me nuts. I couldn't think of anything because it needed to be funny. Well, I think what James Jones, and I could be wrong, but nowadays I'm being like running into Dead Rabbit Command, doing Jumping Jacks in Dead Rabbit Command. If that's what you mean, yeah, I do that every now and then. The other day, I almost had someone run in like the Flash, and I was going to talk about the Flash briefly. And I go, nobody cares what you think about the Flash. Nobody wants to be reminded that I like the Flash. The CGI was terrible, yes, but overall it was fine. I laughed. I like Batman. I always like Batman stuff. I went and saw it with my buddies, which always makes a movie, like elevates a movie a bit. So I just said, running in a Dead Rabbit Command, or I think the person just. So I think, but now I don't go like, because for a while there actually was funny. Like whenever you start a gimmick, it's going to be funny the first couple times. But imagine if I was still doing that. I'd be like, I quit. I'd quit doing the show if I had to do that every single day, because you just couldn't do it. Let's see here. Fosteller, speaking of deep lore, anyone remember the mile-long crocodile? Yes, Crocomile. Crocomile, the movie that I would love to make. I'm still waiting for Sci-Fi Channel to send me that check. Crocomile. That would be a great one. I have Crocomile. There's 2 movies that I pitch on the podcast. Crocomile. It's about a mile-long crocodile, which just sounds amazing. Who doesn't want to watch that? I wrote the first couple of pages of the script. I have the outline. The second one was, and it'll be a crime against humanity if they don't actually use this title. They'll never use my plot. But I came up with the idea. It's a future where all the cars are electric and they're actually auto-driving cars, and all the roads are perfectly laid out. So you have like the most efficient path anywhere, and it's a completely eco-friendly city. The whole world is like this. And then all of a sudden a monster truck comes barreling out of a bank, and it's crushing all of these little EV cars and smashing them, and it's going all over the place. And the cops can't catch up to this monster truck because they just have these little electric cars that are also running on this same track, but this monster truck can go anywhere. So they have to get a hold of their special agent, this guy, this rookie in the police force. His name is Dom Toretto. Dom Toretto the fourth, great grandson of Dom Toretto. and he has a muscle car that he steals out of a museum, and he has to fight the gas guzzling bad guys, horsepower to horsepower. It's a futuristic version of everyone's favorite franchise. It's called The Last of the Furious. Tell me that wouldn't be, and tell me just right off, tell me that's not an amazing title. The Last of the Furious. But this takes place, it's like Demolition Man meets Fast and the Furious, and the bad guys are driving these like almost like Mad Max trucks they've assembled out of old parts. And then you have Dom Toretto's Chargers, like, and you just have Limp Bizkit blaring from the very first scene to the very end. There's no dialogue. It's just one long crash sequence. Tell me you guys would not watch that. Yeah, Snail Eyes, kind of like Killdozer meets Fast and Furious smash. I think it would be huge. I think The Last of the Furious, sci-fi, Fast and Furious. I've always surprised they never brought Transformers into Fast and the Furious. That's always been a no-brainer. They're both owned by Paramount. They could both totally do that. Okay, so Joe Logan said, I wrote in on a B in my episodes. So you were probably the letter B. You were probably, I could be wrong, but it's possible if you know what episode that is. That's one thing I always wish that I had done is in the show notes say who the Patreon was, but there's just so much work. And it's so far. But I bet you the episode before and after you, I bet you someone wrote in on an alligator. You wrote in on a bee. And the person after you got a C, like a cat or something like that. King Job, I don't think I got a woohoo. So here's the thing, like a lot of that stuff. So sometimes, I apologize for that, King Job, but I don't think, he goes, I don't think I got a woohoo yeah on either of my Patreon episodes. So welcome in, King Job. Assuming I'm pronouncing it right? I think we did talk about that after the episode. You said it is King Job. But woohoo, yeah! Sometimes I'll do that. I'm not thinking. It doesn't mean I'm like, oh, I don't like this guy. He doesn't get a woohoo. He doesn't get a woohoo. I'm just going to go. Sometimes there's like a King Job. I think I'm clearly making up for it at this point. Hey, Dave, I'm glad you've been here. Glad I caught this. Congrats on 5 years. Looking forward to the next 5. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Yeah, a lot of time, like, because the episode really, like, it is edited. Like, sometimes I will do multiple takes on things, especially if I flood my words or that's cutting out stuff like that. If you listen to the live episodes that I record on Sundays, you'll see the edits, but it's recorded in one long chunk. So when you sit down on Sunday at 11 Pacific Standard Time, we start recording at 11:02 usually. Maybe a little bit later. And then it will just go for an hour. And then the episode that's released is 45 minutes. So you'll see like what gets taken out. And sometimes it is, sometimes I'll mess up. I'll clap and I'll be like, so anyways, we're going to get this episode. And I'll really, oh, that's not good. So then I'll redo it. But yeah, that's pretty funny. Short Circuit, The Last of the Furious. That's one of my favorite episodes. Yeah, I think that would be great. Well, so this is an interesting one because I actually forgot about this story. Leon Rosebell. What was the name of the episode where there was a hidden message into an ASMR about the Quran to sleep? So I'm going to give you guys a little tip. This doesn't work 100% of the time, but if you go to the podcast website, if you go to deadrabbitradio.libsyn.com, you can also get there just by, I think, going to deadrabbit.com. But if you go there, if you go to the podcast website, what? Oh, I forgot I built this website. That looks like trash. Anyways, if you go to the main deadrabbitradio.libsyn.com, there's a search bar. And in that search bar, you can type in a word like you would in any search bar, and it will pull up all of the show notes. So what I did was I went to the notes, I typed in Quran, and I found the episode. Let's see. Hidden Messages in Quran for Sleep video. It's episode 854, The Sewer Dwelling Slime Queen of Georgia. Episode 854. So that's how easy that is. That's how I have to check a lot of stuff, whether or not I've covered something, or especially if I mention something. I'll be talking, and I'll be like, this reminds me of an episode we did a couple of years ago about Sewer Dwelling Slime Queen. I'd have to go and find that episode. You go to that. All I did was type in Quran and it popped right up. And this is something all of you guys can do. I've started really specializing the show notes. So when I cover stuff from thinkaboutitdocs.com, I'll say like dog verse 4 aliens, alien killed. So then, like, I'll add that into the title of that story. So then, if one day goes, hey, remember that story where that alien got killed by that dog? I'll type in one of those. I'll type in dog. It'll pull up every time I use in the show notes. Every time I wrote down the word dog, not every time I said it. So there you go. Episode 854. Congratulations. You have a good night too, Ren. Thanks for swinging on by. Yes, a short circuit. The final scene of the trailer that of Last and Furious is Dom Toretto blowing up a wall on the moon. Yes, and the girl, the hot chick, was also at the museum the whole time she was trapped there. I hope YouTube. I really hope. Like again, we were talking about people using my research for their videos, and I think that's awesome. I hope they steal that title. I will be super disappointed. I don't need to get any money. They don't need to give me any credit. I will be super disappointed if they do not use the name The Last of the Furious. That is a no-brainer. I officially give you Paramount total rights over that name. Please. Please, please, please. Rhett S. I'm in the Mungo militia. Can I pilot in a depressing episode? You know what's so funny? When somebody reaches out to me like that and says, hey, do you mind if I if you're in the Patreon, right? Sometimes people when they join the Patreon will be like, hey, I'm really big fan of the UFO stuff. Can you do a UFO episode? There was someone recently, I don't remember who it was, but they said, I want to be in a pirate episode. Here's the thing, you can totally request that. It can take a while, right? It can take a while. It did, like I at a certain point go, okay, I gotta find a pirate episode because he has been supporting the show for like a month or two at this point, and I still hadn't found one. That was again, I want to do stories that not only I want to talk about, but are interesting to hear about. So Rhett S can say, I'm in the Mungo militia. Can I pilot in a depressing episode? Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. Definitely, who knows when it's going to happen? Who knows when it's going to happen? And I think because we go through a list of Patreon supporters and legacy Patreon supporters. And Rhett S, I mean, I can definitely I know you're in the legacy Patreon supporters. We can get you in a depressing episode. Just it may take a while. It may take a while. I'll have to put in my notes. Red request depressing episode. So sometimes, yeah, people and I totally get it. It just can delay things a lot. Vince G. James Jones says that face when no Lego Morph launcher license. The Lego Morph launcher is that the one? I think that was the one I've tried. That's my gang stalkers, and we'll be wrapping this up soon. But I think that's the one that I've tried pronouncing twice, and I think I've just given up. We'll get it eventually. Vince G, I like when you mispronounce words or laugh at your own corny jokes. It's funny because a lot of people hate it. That's the number one. I shouldn't say that's the number one. That actually might be the number one complaint that I get about the show. Like people who don't like the show, they go, he always laughs at his own dumb jokes. The thing is that I'm hearing them for the first time too. Like none of this stuff. There was a time where I would write little jokes in my note margins. I would be like, this joke's gonna be so funny. And then when I recorded, totally fell flat. It was awful. I edited them out like 98% of the time. I don't even write the jokes down anymore. When I did that speech, when I did the Oregon Ghost Conference, I think the speech would have been better had I only practiced it once. The first time I practiced it, it was phenomenal. The second time it was pretty good. The third time it was still okay. But I remember thinking, oh, there was a bunch of funny jokes that popped up in the first two drafts because I was saying stuff for the first time and then laughing about it because I realized what I was saying and then riffing on it. And I can't riff on the same thing twice. People who listen to live episodes, sometimes they'll hear me do it and you can tell there's a difference. Because sometimes I'm laughing so hard, I'm totally mispronouncing words or saying something that doesn't work. Not that it doesn't make sense, but I could go, yeah, then he went out to the football stadium and it really takes place at a baseball park. So now I have to try to recreate because I think the joke's funny. That came off on the top of my head. I try to recreate the joke, but add the new ending and it never works because there's that initial energy is gone. So that's always a cool thing. Listening to those live episodes. But yeah, I'm hearing the jokes for the first time. I tried writing them down before and it sucked. Ira Ono, dude, I haven't seen you in a long time. You've been a long time listener of the show. Really awesome to see you back. I'm sure that you were there. I've just never in the comments. I don't watch Fast Furious Gone in 60 Second ripoffs. I'd watch that though. Yes, we need to get a petition. Can we get that petition.org? Can we get it to the White House? Last and Furious. Joe Logan, I use that search all the time. It's super useful. It totally is. When I have to find something, and especially if it's a weird thing, like sometimes the phrasing, I can get the phrasing just right. But yeah, even I type in something like Bigfoot UFO, it does have to be in those order. It does have to be in that order. I don't think it's clear enough that it can actually. Yeah, yeah. In that episode, I said, in that episode in my notes, it specifically said Bigfoot UFO, so that can really help it out. Let's see here. Leon, no problem. I'm glad I was able to help you. And yeah, that search function, like Joe said, is really good. You're the best. It's no wonder you've made it 5 years. Thanks, Rhett. Really appreciate it. It's been awesome. It's been totally awesome. Dirk Groveman said, I was wondering when the gang stalkers would show up. Yeah, those cars, man, they just rev up outside of there. Synapsis uses good stream, bro. Snail Eyes, bro, your GhostCon speech was great. Thank you. Snail Eyes was there. Snail Eyes was there. Sabine thinks that I need to hire Snail Eyes. I mean, I have no money. I have no money, but Sabine was so impressed by Snail Eyes. There, she's like, you gotta hire her. You gotta hire her. I don't know what for. I don't know what for, but really impressed. Really cool group of people. I haven't started reading that book yet that Ramses gave me, but I moved it from my living room into my bedroom. That's the first step to me start reading something. And Sammy Moore. Oh yeah, Sammy was there too. Sammy was there too. Oregon Ghost Conference was great. I'm glad you enjoyed it. We're gonna be. I just put in my application today for the Port Gamble, Washington Ghost Conference. Now, if I get accepted, the speech is, again, why are there no fat ghosts? But it's a completely different speech. I'm going to use completely different examples because that topic is just too good to pass. Like, just the name of it is too clickbaity. But if you happen to hear why are there no fat ghosts, it's a completely new speech because I'm just going to find the same thing: ghosts of people who were brutally murdered, brutally mutilated. Maybe I'll include the ghost and the Payless shoe stores in the actual real one this time. That would be good. Mule Man, I've been listening to your podcast for 3 years and never said how much I appreciate your efforts, especially silly. And you're up there with the best. Congratulations on the 5 years. Unbelievable. Well, Mule Man, I'm glad that you've been listening. That really is awesome. That is, and I appreciate that feedback. That's totally awesome. Connie Williams, first time here. LOL in my pancake off great medicine. Wait, what? I'm assuming you're highly medicated because you mentioned the medication. Thank you hugely, but thank you for coming here. Thank you for being part of live stream. Yeah, Snail Eyes. I didn't say exactly what she didn't go what I would hire Snail Eyes for, like publicity. I was like, I don't have any. What would I hire? She just goes. Snail Eyes is so passionate. Snail Eyes is so passionate about the podcast. And I was like, yeah, it's pretty awesome. But I mean, I don't have money. Maybe someday, publicist, right? On the ground researcher. James Jones, I still have the recording. I'll get it uploaded when I have the chance. I don't know what that's in reference to, the Lego Morph launcher. That's funny. Just DM in the Discord. Samuel Morris, if you haven't realized me, Ramsey, and Snail Eyes, I didn't know that. I totally didn't know that. I didn't know how the because I think I gave Ramses a shout out. I know I gave Ramses a shout out. I know I gave Snail Eyes a shout out, and I gave Sammy and the other guy there. I think I gave you a co shout out because I didn't know the relationship between you two. But yeah, yeah. So that was, but yeah, we'll be coming back to the Port Gamble Ghost Conference in Washington. That's in November, so that's quite a few months away. And again, I just the speech. Okay, James was there as well. James was there as well. Not a problem. Yeah. I will say this, and we'll wrap it up like this because we've gone over 3 hours. I will say this, and for the people who were at the Ghost Conference and the people who weren't, there was video footage of me talking to Darren Marlar, and it was recorded from the stage because there was a live YouTube show going on, right? Snix, thank you so much for the live chat donation. Really appreciate it. Congrats on 5 years. I'll put you down for a shout out in the episode. Really, really appreciate it. That is so awesome. I saw myself, Snail Eyes and Sammy can attest to this, and James as well. I saw myself on stage. They're like, we didn't really notice it that much, but I saw myself from this video camera on stage, and I go, I do not like how I look. Mm-mm, mm-mm. So since then, I've lost 30 pounds. And I know I talk about my weight a lot on this show, and it goes up and down. It does go up and down, especially when I was on keto, because it would just like water bloat and stuff like that. Where I would come back, I think if I would came back from the Oregon conference, I was pushing like 310, something like that. Um, Maybe a little bit higher. But I was like, I saw video footage and I was like, is that a trick of the light? Is that what is going on? That can't be my stomach. That can't be. And I, what? Huh? And so that was a wake up call for me. And really, I've just been eating right and exercising. Like, generally speaking, I don't do it every single day. Generally speaking, I have about 1,200, 1,500 calories a day, and I lift weights when I walk. And clothes fit me better, and I'll flex a little bit for but I just, yeah, no, that was a good wake up call for me. I'm glad sometimes you got to see yourself on video to be like, nah, this isn't how I want to be. And it's been a fun journey. I mean, really, that's been since April, March, something like that. Yeah. So I feel really, really good. And especially because I'm going to go spend a month with my mom, I don't want to eat a bunch of junk food there. And, good habits start early. So I'm glad that I started this journey back in April, March. Get it done. Get it done. That's funny. Connie Willis, nope, not medicated, but could use what you use. I use a little bit of Diet Mountain Dew. This is mine. This is my medicine. Well, that's not fair. I also have all of this. I also have all of this. I have all of this, but it's stuff like beta blockers and Pepto. Here, this is how we'll end the live stream. Some family. Oh, you guys can't see it. Weight loss tips, man. It was just for me. It was just eat. Well, so here it's funny because no valerian root. I got to be super careful because a lot of stuff interferes with beta blockers. I got muscle relaxers and all that stuff. You got to be careful with. Wait, no, there's valerian root. Yeah, you got to be careful with interfere with. One thing that I looked at, so what happened was I was heavy in high school. I was 310 when I graduated high school. I dropped down to 220 in about a year just by lifting weights and cutting calories. And then fast forward, over the years I put back on, I jumped up to 350 over the course of about 20 years. That was the heaviest I ever got. Got down to 270 due to keto, but hit a wall. And then I for a while there, I would go between 290 and 310. I would kind of be in that sector. But it always felt more like bloat than actual like fat. But when I was at the conference and I saw that video, I was like, that's not bloat. That's like me. I got to lose weight. And so I went and I go, what are the best workouts for my body type, which I'm an endomorph. There's ectomorph, mesomorph, and endomorph. And it's like reading the horoscope because you're like, wow, this totally applies to me. Endomorphs are just big guys. And they say, once you sit down, you don't like to move. They'll find any excuse to sit down. But if they do high intensity workouts, if they lift smaller weights for longer periods of time, they grow muscles super fast. You have to eat less than you would normally want to eat. Like someone who's a mesomorph or an endomorph, ectomorph, they're more, the linky. They need to eat a lot. You should eat very, very little calories if you're a big guy and you want to lose weight, and you've got to lift smaller amounts. I lift 7.5 pounds and I walk. It's 3 miles to work and 3 miles back. And I'm lifting 7.5 pounds the whole way doing curl. Now I worked my way up from 2 pounds back in April. Now I'm at 7.5 pounds and I'm just lifting. I don't want to show off my shoulders. I'm not that vain, but I mean, like I can see when I was on keto, I was losing weight and my clothes fit better, but it felt different than now where you can see the musculature in my shoulders. Like there's physical differences in my shoulders. And it's not that I'm just losing fat or losing water weight. It's that I'm changing the body. And that was the thing. Like I was telling Sabine, I go, had I seen these physical because on keto, I just go, first off, let's not forget, I went from 350 down to really, let's say 300, because then I kind of hovered around there. So keto got me to lose 50 pounds very, very quickly, and I've kept that off. I'm super grateful for it. But I never saw these radical body changes. My clothes fit a little bit better, or a lot better. I mean, from 350 to 300. But then from there was a struggle. But I can physically see differences in my bodies. I can see muscles in my arm that were not visible in April. So high intensity, and again, I'm not like running with weights like that. I'm on beta blockers, which makes it really hard to get the heart rate up. It kind of stops your heart at about 80, 90 beats per minute. But I'm just doing this, and I'll do this for like a block, and then I'll get too hard. So then I do some hammer curls for a block, and then I'll do some reverse curls, right? And I had to work my way up to this. Like I started off doing it with 2-pound weights. That's it. It's almost that pace, maybe even a little slower, but you do it for 45 minutes. You get cut and it works. And then you come home and I eat the same thing every night. I eat 3 little spaghetti meals and a can of green beans. It's like 750 calories. 2 Slim Fast, that's it. That's what I eat. I've been doing that since April and I've lost 30 pounds. So, I mean, it's dope. It's dope. I love it. And it's sustainable, right? Because on the weekends I will go out. I'm out with my friends. We'll hit up Modern Taco, eat some tacos. See, you couldn't do that on keto. The second I went off keto, I would gain like 20 pounds. It's all water weight, and I'd feel gross. So now I eat really well, and then once or twice a week have a reasonable meal, a reasonable night out. Not a bunch of ice cream, not a bunch of sugary drinks. So, yeah, really, really. There you go. That's a weird way to end the paranormal. But I guess, that's 5 years, right? That's part of the journey, right? Is spiritual health, physical health. It all works. But I'm going to go ahead and head on out, guys. I think this might be our longest live stream yet, but I had a ton of fun. What a way to do 5 years. Talking to all you guys. Totally awesome. Lots of fun. And I'll eventually upload this to the podcast. It's going to take forever. I'll have to turn into audio, but really, I love you guys. Thank you so much. Whether or not this was your first episode, whether or not this was the only thing you've ever seen, thank you so much for being part of the Fluffle. We're just getting started. 5 years. We're going to do it. Couldn't have done without you guys. Really, really, really awesome. Thanks, guys. Have a great night, everybody. That was a lot of fun. Wait, do I hit it? Is it done yet? No, I think we're still going. Your stream will end immediately. So I'm going to hit this button now, everybody. I'm getting dabbed on by YouTube. I got to go. I can't get dabbed on anymore.